I'm so thrilled to have everyone here. My name is Lisa Clarkson, and I am the Executive Director of Business and Rights and Production Sustainability here at CBC. So welcome to everyone. For those of you that may not know, One Stop Business Workshop, I hope you do know because you're here, but One Stop Business Workshop is a way of untangling some of the complexities that come with the business side of creating content. And our sole goal is to work with pre-emerging producers and creators so that the stories of equity-deserving groups can be told. You may wonder how it started, and the fact is that it started actually with the idea of someone just like you. Business and Rights was doing sessions across the country called Connecting with Communities, and one of the people in those sessions said, like CBC is going across the country, and Telephone is doing that, and CMPA has sessions. Why do you all make it so complicated? Why don't you all come together and do something which we can see more easily how all of the pieces fit together? And so that was the idea that led to One Stop Business Workshop. We started in 2019 through the planning and the partnership of our friends at Cavco and CMPA, and we did an in-person session, our first one, in Halifax in 2019, and COVID, COVID, and then we moved to online in the summer of 2020. And since then, the seasons, I hope you've checked them out. There's all sorts of things in there, like how do you work with a distributor, how do you work with a broadcaster, what is chain of title, blah, da, da, da. But we've done 5 seasons and have had 45,000 views. So it's really worked out well virtually, and we felt that there was an intimacy and an importance to getting everyone back together in person. And so this is our first attempt post-COVID to not just do an in-person session. Welcome to the people that are online as well. We have 40, someone's gesturing to me, so I'm like, oh, should I move over here? I don't take instructions very well, so they probably were expecting me to be here. All right, I'm going to go here. Did I just ruin it? Hello to the people online. We're so happy that you're here with us as well. So just a few things before we get underway. We will share the slides afterwards. We are taping it, so the sessions will be available to you afterwards as well. And we will blast out links and information that come up during the sessions, so don't feel that you have to scribble those down. We'll make sure that you get those in an easy to digest fashion afterwards. For those of you that are in the room, if you need a bathroom, accessible washrooms are to the left out the door, and other washrooms are to the right. The Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi at cbc.ca. It should just come up. It should be pretty obvious, but if it's not, just ask anyone with a name tag. We'd like to acknowledge that this event is being hosted in Toronto, which for thousands of years has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. So today, this place is home to many Indigenous people, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work together on this land. And for those of you that are joining remotely, we encourage you to take the time to acknowledge and reflect on the First Peoples of the lands, where you're located, as we work together in a spirit of reconciliation and reciprocity. A few words about the structure of today. So we've got 3 sessions. The first session is business building blocks. Our hope is that We will build together certain fundamentals so that the second session, which is an interactive session, will make sense. The second session will be broken up into 3 components, from what you do when your idea is in development all the way up to production financing. And then the third session, we'll hear from some creators who have brought their scripted series to life. You'll see there's 3 tables over there at the lunchtime, which is generously sponsored by CMF and Telefilm. At the lunchtime, there'll be people who will be personing those tables, and they are there to answer all of your questions about environmental sustainability and how you produce something more sustainably, about accessibility and how you produce something in a way which is more accessible so that everyone can participate, and also about production financing. So I really encourage you to walk up to those tables and ask those people. They're there for you. I think the most important thing that we're really hoping for from today's session is that you bring your curiosity and questions. Every single question you have is a question which others will benefit from, whether or not they're here in the room or virtually or after the fact. So please, please, please feel empowered to ask whatever it is. If you don't understand a term, if someone's using an acronym and that doesn't make sense, please ask, because it will make it much more of a lively session. For those of you that are online, put your questions in the chat, and we'll make sure that either myself or Christina Tonner, the mastermind behind all of this, will make sure that the questions are posed to the panel. Before we turn to today's agenda, I just want to say a word about the very sad passing of Charles Officer this week. Charles was a co-founder of the Black Screen Office and an esteemed filmmaker in the community who very much embodied what we're trying to do here at One Stop. He never stopped fighting to tell stories that might not have otherwise been told, including most recently the porter for CBC that won 12 Canadian Screen Awards. So we dedicate this session to Charles. And so now, I can't see a darn thing. Now I'm going to pass it over to Adam Garnett-Jones from APTN, who is our moderator for our first session. And he's like the Pied Piper. He's piping in. I feel like I should sing or something, but you don't want that. He will introduce our esteemed panelists. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. I'm not going to introduce everyone because I can't do it. But I would like to, I'll introduce myself and then invite everyone down the line to just go through and just say your name, where you're from, who you're representing, and then we'll have an opportunity to get into the part where we talk about what we do in detail. So my name is Adam Garnett-Jones, and I am currently the Director of TV Content and Special Events for APTN. It's very funny to me. I was looking at the One Stop Business Workshop sign. It was very, very funny to me that I'm here moderating this panel, because I've always been kind of like a weirdo artist for most of my career, and then I found myself on the funding side a number of years ago, and it still makes me laugh to be up here asking questions about tax credits and whatnot. So anyway, that's a little bit of background for me. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I'm Suzanne Lacey, Deputy Director of the Bell Fund. And that's a great way to start, I think, Adam, because I think it's super important that everybody realizes that, you know, all the funders, it's kind of a scary landscape out there, but we are all just people, and surprisingly, for the most part, we will pick up a phone or, you know, get back to you on email and actually have a chat with you. So don't be afraid, don't be intimidated to reach out to your funders. What am I saying? I'm Deputy Director at Bell Fund, and that's it for now?
Sure, that's great.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, everyone. Rod Butler, VP Content at the Canada Media Fund. I'm a person who stutters, so today I may stumble and block on a few words. No one freak out. I will spit it out eventually. At the CMF, we fund a lot of content. I think what Suzanne said is excellent. This is a way to kind of demystify a lot of things, and we're just people, so learn, and if there's something we didn't get across, stop us after we're here, and we'll hopefully have a conversation.
Hi, my name is Hiba Harish. I am a quality assurance officer at CAFCO. I've been with CAFCO for 16 years. My main job is to mentor and provide support to tax credit officers. Like Rod, I may stutter a little bit, but we'll make it work.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Broadfoot. I'm Vice President, Industry and Business Affairs at the Canadian Media Producers Association, which I know is a big mouthful. I've been there for about a year, but before that, I was SVP of Finance and Business Affairs at Boat Rocker Media, and I was at WildBrain for many years before that, so I come from a producing business background.
Hi, I'm Peter Schneider, and hello, I'm Peter Schneider. I'm a manager in business and rights here at the CBC. I've been here since February, and before that I was Vice President of Business and Legal Affairs for a large Canadian production company. And I think I've been invited today not so much to speak about my organization, but to be here as a resource for any questions on business and legal affairs.
Excellent. And I see on my trusty sheet here that everyone has sat in speaking order for the next question, which is extremely convenient. And I don't think it was organized. So I would just like to invite all of you to, again, just talk a little bit about the broad strokes of what the organization that you represent does in the industry. Just talk about who it is that you're representing and the breadth of what you do. And Peter, you can talk about some business affairs and legal and the kind of broader importance and role of that in the industry. Very small thing. And then if you can also just talk about what your organization does for emerging new creators in the industry, what the kind of open spaces are for those people.
Okay, great. So Bell Fund is a CIPF. Those of you who don't know, that's a Certified Independent Production Fund. There's a few of them in the industry. Again, that landscape is a bit complex. Basically, it means we operate as a not-for-profit with financing from Bell. Bell gives us money each year so we can then run programs to give money out to the Canadian independent production community, specifically programs for Canadian independent producers. Our main programs are TV series, short-form digital series, and slate development. Today I'll focus on short-form and on slate because TV is the super, kind of the golden ticket. It's something you achieve typically later in your career. But certainly we've supported through our TV series program series like The Porter on CBC, for example, and like Acting Good on APTN. But the short-form digital series and the slate development programs are two programs that you guys should know about as emerging creators. And what would I say? I would say definitely check out bellfund.ca. Check out our website, check out those two programs. We have audio recordings of webinars and application clinics. We do a lot of outreach to help people build strong applications. And again, so info@bellfund.ca is a place to reach out to. Again, we'll make that available to you guys afterwards with any questions. Did I answer the questions or something I haven't done yet?
I think so. I'm just wondering if you could talk about what people need to do in order to be eligible for those funds. Are they broadcaster supported? Is it in partnership?
Oh, excellent point. Yes. So what Bell Fund did is back in 2017, we launched those two programs in particular, slate development and short-form digital series, for emerging creators and for underrepresented voices in the industry, because we found a lot of the funds relied on a Canadian broadcaster to be a partner. You needed a Canadian broadcaster's license agreement to get in the door. And a lot of people were not getting that seat at the table. Again, that's kind of a tough one to achieve. So we wanted to launch programs where Canadian independent producers could apply without a broadcaster. Now, you still need what we call market interest, but that could come from a digital channel. We support a lot of YouTube channels. It could be a non-Canadian distributor, a non-Canadian digital channel, for example. So there are just more options. It still is tough. You still have to find a channel or a market partner for our programs, but you don't have to find a Canadian broadcaster to support you. So that's what's unique about those two programs, and hopefully gives you more opportunities to come as an emerging creator.
That's great. Thanks very much. Just before you start, Rod, I'm going to also say the format of today, we're going to talk for the first hour amongst ourselves. I'm going to ask the panelists a number of questions, and then for the remaining 30 minutes at the end, there will be opportunities for all of you in the audience to ask questions. So if things come up as we're talking, please do write those questions down. There will be an opportunity to ask them. And for those of you, I don't know, I'm looking at the TV screen. For those of you who are online, there will also be an opportunity to ask questions. Lisa is going to be moderating the chat, pulling questions out, and we'll get to those during that last half hour as well. Thanks.
Great. So the Canada Media Fund, the CMF, what is the CMF? So it's a big pile of money that hopefully everyone in this room can apply to and get money to fund great content. That is the point of the CMF. We're in the business of funding great content. Our program supports, there's a digital media side to our programming, so that's right now called the experimental stream. For the purposes of today, I'm going to talk much more about our convergent stream, which is effectively the linear television side. The CMF on the linear TV sides funds content in the genres of writing, performing arts, documentary, kids, and drama. And so because we're this big pile of money, oftentimes people are like, why is that a rule at the CMF? Why is that dumb thing on page 92 of your guidelines some rule? And so usually the reason is, look at who pays the CMF's bills. So we get funding from either the government of Canada or the distributors of cable and satellite. So if you have a Rogers subscription for TV, not internet, 5% of that, or roughly 5% of that, goes to fund the Canada Media Fund. And so because of this tension between the public and the private, we're always trying to reconcile how do we reflect the public policy objectives of the government of Canada mixed with reflect what the industry needs. So right now, there's a lot of flux in the industry. The Broadcasting Act was just passed. There was a CRTC proceeding that is going on right now. This is counter-programming for those proceedings. And I think, again, in terms of accessing the CMF, we can get into exactly how or strategies. And I think I want to first just impart the kind of cold shower approach here in the sense of there's a finite amount of money. There's a lot of money, but there's a finite amount of money. Everyone here wants it. Not everyone here is going to get it. So this is something where there's a lot of rules. There's a lot of requirements to access funds. And I think it's something where you want to read the guidelines to access the CMF's programs many times. You want to come to the CMF near expert in your understanding, because I think the CMF always wants to help, but I think we need you to be at a certain level. And so we want to make sure that in order to give you the best advice, that you've done your work as a producer. If it's a new producer or an old one, we want to make sure that we're not wasting your time at all. So all this being said, the CMF has many programs. We have, I think, roughly 35 each year, more or less. And so the biggest gatekeeping function at the CMF is what Suzanne said in terms of there's a broadcaster license fee that must be obtained to effectively unlock CMF funds. So you can apply to funds, you can say this is the best project since sliced bread, this is the best, unless there is a license agreement from a CBC or a Bell or Rogers, et cetera, you won't have the ability to unlock the war chest at the CMF. So as a producer, again, this is where I want to impart, golden rule, make it impossible for funds like the CMF to say no. That is your job. Your one job is to make it impossible. You've read the guidelines. You have everything on point. You have all of your rules in check. You have the best project, and make it impossible just because the volume of candidates and applications that the CMF receives each year keeps going up. And so with all that said, in terms of accessibility, I think other good advice is basically, if you have a weakness, if you're not the creative, get a creative person. If you're not the business person, get a business person. If you don't like writing applications, find someone who can, or get really good at it before you submit. If you're starting out, don't try and do a big budget drama series. I think start with development, start with pre-development, start with web series. So build your career with the knowledge that no one wants to take a risk on you until you've done something. And so have that in your mind. No one owes you anything, and approach it like I have to convince them and make myself undeniable. That would be my kind of golden rule.
So again, like I said, my name is Hibba and I work for CAFCO, and I realized I said CAFCO and then it wasn't my turn anymore, and most of you may not know what CAFCO is. So CAFCO is the Canadian Audiovisual Certification Office. We are the federal tax credit. We, along with the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency, we co-administer 2 tax credits for the Canadian film and video productions. The first tax credit is the CPTC, which is the Canadian Film or Video Tax Credit. That tax credit is a 25% tax credit 25% of your qualified labor expenditure of an eligible production, and that tax credit is available for Canadian production companies. The second tax credit is the PSTC, which is the Production Services Tax Credit, and that tax credit is worth 16% of qualified labor expenditure, the Canadian labor expenditure, and that tax credit is available for Canadian-based production companies or production services companies. So similar to what Rod was saying, we want to help you. We want to help Canadian filmmakers make productions. So what we ask of you is to do your homework, read our guidelines, read our public notices. I know the guidelines may be a bit overwhelming when you first look at them, but once you're accustomed with them, they're no longer overwhelming. And if they are overwhelming, we are here to help. We have an email, a generic email that we check every single day. We respond to emails, we respond to phone calls. We're here to help you. A piece of advice I'd like to give you, you're new filmmakers, you're emerging, you should lead with that once you contact us. Let us know that you're new in the industry, because it'll avoid people like me using acronyms that you may not be familiar with. We will know that we need to give you a bit more details per se, more than we would give someone who's been in the industry for 10 or 20 years. So always let us know that you're new. I promise we're patient and we will help you along the way. We have a lot of rules and regulations. However, they're easy to sort of accomplish if you've done your homework before you begin your production. Because if you start a production and then decide to read our guidelines, you may find that you're already offside, you're already ineligible because you did not do your homework initially. So please do your homework. Part of Adam's question was what we're doing to help new and emerging filmmakers. So what we do at CAFCO is not per se catered to new filmmakers. So what we do is across the board, it helps everybody in the same way. I would like to, however, touch upon something. In the one-stop workshop that we did in June 2020, my part of the presentation, somebody in the audience asked me a question about stock footage and whether we are willing to make an exception if the stock footage basically makes the production offside, where they are spending more non-Canadian costs than they're supposed to. Because one of our rules is that you cannot exceed more than 25% in non-Canadian cost when it comes to whether it's production or post-production costs. And my answer at the time was, sadly, no, there's no exception that we can make because it's in the regulations. You cannot be offside. However, recently, and actually last year, we released a public notice and we changed our stock footage rule, and stock footage costs are no longer counted towards your 25%, 75% non-Canadian cost threshold. So we listen. When we have public notices, we first put out a call for comments. We listen to industry representatives. We take those comments into consideration when we write our policies. We're always trying to assimilate, adapt, and help in any way that we can. Anything else I didn't answer?
No, I think that's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Hiba. So the CMPA is the National Trade Association for English language producers in Canada. We are not a funder. We don't have any money, unfortunately. But we do represent around 600 independent producers across Canada. The vast majority of those are small to medium-sized businesses. We are, however, a production company-based organization, so you have to be a company to apply for membership at the CMPA. What we do overall is we negotiate all the labor agreements, so the Writers Guild, ACTRA, IATSE, DGC, and similar in BC. We have an office in BC that does that as well. So we negotiate all those labor agreements on behalf of all of our members. We also are a registered lobbying organization, so we advocate at the federal and provincial levels for the needs of the production industry as a whole, not just our members, but all of the producers. Most recently, that has meant working very closely with the Department of Canadian Heritage on Bill C-11, also known as the Online Streaming Act. And that is the act that was passed in the spring to modernize the Broadcasting Act to bring streamers into the broadcast regulatory tent. And now that process is going through the Canadian Radio Telecommunications the CRTC. It's going through the CRTC right now as various interveners make their case for what should be included in the regulations for this new world. So that's a big part of the work that we have done. We also work very closely with our partners at CAVCO and at provincial tax credit agencies across the country to advocate for producers for favorable tax credits for things like stock footage changes. In Ontario recently, this has been a long time coming, we've been working with Ontario Creates on modernizing the tax credit to include online-only productions in eligibility. So we work very closely with our partners across the country. For new and emerging producers, we have a couple of things that we do. We have a very robust mentorship program where our members can access mentees from across the country. That's creative mentees, business, producers, and it's extremely successful. We've turned out some amazing mentees who've gone on to do great things across the country. We also have various levels of membership. We have a startup membership that is, I think it's $300 a year, and you can access that for a couple of years while you're getting up to the next level of being a professional production company that can apply for full membership after that, and you have access to all of the labor agreements. You get discounted rates on the fees and the labor agreements. We do a number of workshops across the country over the years. We also, what else do we do? We advocate strongly for continued funding for agencies like the Canada Media Fund and Telefilm. So we're like an overall advocacy organization for producers across the country in general.
Excellent. Your turn.
Okay. So business and legal affairs, I'd say that all active producers will have somebody handling their business and legal affairs. And that's because they want to focus on why they got into this in the first place, which is usually the creative side of things. So at a certain stage, they're going to have someone handling all that business and legal affairs. As an emerging producer, I was thinking, when or why would you want to spend money on a lawyer or business and legal affairs? And I was thinking one of the key things that happens in that department is managing the rights. And so an established producer who's producing something, some content that's going to a broadcaster or somebody or some entity has paid them for their content, that person, that entity is going to expect two things among many deliverables. One is insurance, and the second is a representation and warranty that you as the producer actually own and control whatever it is that you've just sold or licensed to that entity. And how do you prove that? You prove that with a massive pile of documents. Any creative person who touches your content has a legal right to it. So you want to make sure that they've assigned that right to you. As an emerging producer, you're going to have an idea. It's either your own, or it's somebody else's, or it's your partner, or it's based on a story you read. Whatever kernel of idea or project you're looking at developing, you want to make sure that you actually own and control the underlying right to that project. You can do that simply by having, say, an email exchange with someone. That could be good. Eventually, you're going to want to make that chain of title better. And if your emerging project is something that's come from a partner, maybe you'll have a letter of agreement between the two of you. You can draft that yourself, or you can hire a lawyer to draft it. A lot of it is going to depend on how or who's going to want to see it. How tight does it need to be? The tighter, the better. And a lawyer can help you make that tighter. Established producers will have a little department or a group of people who just do this all the time. As an emerging producer, you may have one or two kernels of ideas, and just make sure that those ideas are legally connected to you. And that's the kind of early kernel of business and legal affairs with emerging projects. How's that?
Excellent, thank you. And I just want to segue into the next question, and just by commenting on that a little bit, that often new and emerging producers don't have those conversations about rights and about any partnerships that they're entering into, because it feels awkward, it feels uncomfortable, it feels like you want to have good relationships with the people that you're collaborating with, and so you don't want to jump to those kinds of legal agreements. But the legal agreements are actually a really great way to start those conversations if you haven't had them with any people that you're working with, any vendors, any creative partners, because one of the things that emerging producers often get wrong is delaying those conversations until it's too late, and then it gets really messy, and you get into all kinds of troubles with people that otherwise you would have had really great working relationships with, and then you end up having to hire lawyers and going into debt, and it's terrible. So with that, I want to say, for each of you, what would you say the number one mistake is that you see producers making when they're just starting out, what piece of advice, number one piece of advice, would you give to new producers starting out?
Okay, so yeah, I like that conversation, because for me, it's framing it for emerging creators as a business. And because I am finding a lot of folks are great at pitching. They have creative ideas, they're pitching. But you do also have to remember and keep in mind it is a business. Think of it like any other business, like you're opening a bakery or a restaurant. You know, there's bricks and mortar, there's costs, there's relationships you have to build. It's all the same with the film industry. There is an expectation you're going to put some money in yourself, maybe to build your business. There's things you have to buy and invest in. And that is what the topic is here today, is business. So just something good to keep in mind. In terms of starting out, so give yourself lots of time. Again, look at that funding landscape. You know, I won't kid you, it's terrible. It's complicated, it's messy. You need to just get some spreadsheets out, see who's funding what the deadlines are, what the notification dates are. Even when it comes to web series, there's a bunch of us, but some will fund fiction, some won't. Some will fund first season, some won't. So you do have to figure out who will fund the content you're making. Again, give yourself lots of time. We tell people 3 months to prepare for an application. And network, and that's not a scary word, that just means a conversation with people. And what I often find is even asking somebody for 10 minutes, who's going to say no to 10 minutes, right? So whether they're a production executive, a broadcaster, a funder, I mean, a funder will often take more than 10 minutes, but ask for a 10-minute conversation and be prepared. Read their guidelines, like we said. Read the guidelines. It takes time. Read them again, read them again. Put them into your notes. Build, a landscape where ultimately you're going to get the money. And I often tell people as well, there's probably a lot of creatives in this room, you've got great ideas, you're pitching. Often I stop people when they start telling me their creative pitches because I want to know, what's your plan to get the money? If you can get the money, you can make your creative dreams come true, but you've got to get the money first. Our slate development program, you don't even bring your content, you don't even bring your creative. You bring your team, your plan, your budget, your market partner, the person you're going to work with. You're building a business case. You're pitching. You're saying, this is me. This is my company. These are the people I'm with. You're going to talk about maybe that there is a market out there for the content you want to make, but you're not going to get into the creative at all. It's basically saying, take a chance on me. It's like we're a bank and you're pitching to get a business loan. So really, think of it with your business hat on, connect with people, try and work your way forward to getting that money and building that team. And lastly, I would just say, again, this was mentioned earlier, if you are emerging, size it, right? You want to create some content that is doable because that's a calling card. You want it to be good. You don't want to be building inferior content and putting that out into the world. You might have one shot to make a 3-minute film. Make it great. Do the best you can. Yes, that might cost you out of your own pocket, but you have to decide if it's worth it for the business that you're building. So, so that's what I would say. Take your time, talk to people, build it up, think of it like a business, and keep in touch. Good luck.
Excellent. Thank you.
That was such a great answer. I have to follow that. I'm sorry, because everything that you just said is exactly true, and I just want to keep saying it. Treat it like a business is just like tattoo that on your brain. This is a business. Everyone has ideas. Not everyone can execute, and it's the role of a producer to tie all these disparate, loose threads together. Like that's why they pay you the medium bucks, right? This is why you're here. Because the creative is great and everyone has amazing ideas, but that kind of tangible ability to pull it together is why you're here. And if it was easy, everyone would be here. I think in terms of, again, I'm going to piggyback and rip off so many things that was just said, but I think one, also just being parts of events like this is a great step. Like, put yourself in these rooms. There's a lot of serendipity that goes on. And you never know, and only the people that are active get lucky. You don't get lucky if you're at home. So push yourself, get out there, treat it like a business. Again, I was gonna say, read the guidelines. Yeah, I write the guidelines with my team each year. I apologize in advance. Like, they are opaque, and they're opaque for a reason. Like, we need to be able to communicate to you what your responsibilities are without giving you, a phone book. And so but that means it can't be a brochure. It's going to be 20 to 25 pages or more, and it's going to be technical, and it's not going to be fun. So read them and read them again. And I think, when you call us to ask for help, if you've read them and you have a question that is more pointed than just explain to me how this works, I think that's where, again, we are in the business of wanting to fund you. And no bureaucrat like me wants to not fund a great idea. But it's not always up to us just to say, okay, Rod Butler thinks X, this is genius, and I'm just going to write with my feather, you are funded. This is money from the public purse. This is taxpayer money. It has to be a transparent process then. And so, we're in your corner. We want to fund the next great thing. That makes us look so smart and great. We want to be in your corner. But I think because of the process, because of where the money is coming from, at least at the CMF, our hands are tied in terms of we're going to audible and call you in even if you don't meet the 1,001 checked boxes that have to be checked. So it's a business. Do your work. If you're applying for a mortgage, if you're applying for a bank loan, all of this stuff, you would level up your game to make sure that you got it. Level up your game. And again, if you're creative and have good ideas, as Peter says, know where to partner. How much is a lawyer worth? Way too much, probably, but maybe it's worth it if you think that's your entry point in. If that lawyer can unlock all of this other money, it's a strategic risk. So it's a business, know your strengths, and really just put in the work.
So I know the question was to list the top mistake that we see or the most common mistake that we see, but I'm going to cover a few, and they all sort of fall under the same not going by our guidelines or not doing the homework initially. The most common one I'd say would have to do with producer-related or key creative personnel. So I'll start with producer-related. As you're emerging, you may promise some individuals executive producer credits, let's say. Be careful not to give out those credits to people who have not earned them. First things first, these individuals, if they are Canadian, they need CAFCO IDs. So if you plan to give someone a credit, make sure they have that CAFCO ID before you give them the credit. We've seen so many situations where a producer grants a certain individual a credit and then they have a falling out, or they can no longer reach that person. And then that person cannot apply for a CAFCO ID, which creates a problem for the producer. So if they're Canadian, make sure that they have that CAFCO ID before you give them that credit. If they're not Canadian, make sure they're filling out the courtesy credit affidavit and make sure you have parity with Canadian versus non-Canadian producer-related credits. I know that might sound like gibberish, but if you read our guidelines, you'll probably remember what I said. Don't give out credits to people who have not earned them, and make sure they filled out the documentation that they need to fill out in order for you to not be put offside. Moving on to key creatives. One of our rules is that you have to obtain 6 out of 10 Canadian content points, which means your key creatives, if they are Canadian, you need a CAFCO ID for those individuals before they commence their work on your production, so that you are not put offside. I mean, they could obtain the CAFCO ID during the work if they are Canadian. However, I recommend that they have that CAFCO ID before they start working in case you fall into any sort of mishaps with the individual. That way you already have that CAFCO ID. Also part of our rules, so like I said, you have to have 6 out of 10 Canadian content points, but we also have some stipulations. Your first or your second lead must be Canadian, your screenwriter or your director must be Canadian. So those are very important points to not forget. Another common mistake, I'll list the Shown in Canada requirement. So we have a requirement that once you apply, you have to provide us with a commitment from a CRTC licensed broadcaster or Canadian distributor that the production will be shown in Canada within the first 2 years of exploitation, or when it becomes commercially exploitable. It is very important to obtain that. If you do not have it, and if those 2 years elapse, you can't go back, and you can't go back in time, basically. So you absolutely have to have that commitment and provide it to us when you submit your application.
Excellent, thank you.
Well, I feel like I'm just going to repeat what everyone said about, I think the biggest thing I see with emerging producers is that they don't fully understand and appreciate the business of production, and not just, revenue and expenditures, but also the structures of productions, that there are Canadian content productions, there are production service productions, there's treaty co-pros, interprovincial co-pros, there's a whole vast array of types of production structures that you can put in place. And also understanding that if you are applying for funding, then it comes with responsibilities. You are not entitled to that funding. There are rules and requirements. This, as Rod said, this is public money in many cases, so it does come with responsibilities. The other thing I see, not so much in my role now, but in my previous role when people would come to us with projects is, if you're not good at the business side of it, partner with someone who is. And that can be taking your project to an established producer, working with them who will have a strong business affairs department and who can understand contractual relationships. I always used to joke that everyone starts out with a great relationship. It's all sunshine and roses at the beginning, and then they would yell at us lawyer types for how detailed we were in the agreements, and like, no, everything's fine. What could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? And everyone thinks that at the beginning, and then partway through, when things do go wrong, they are grateful to have the legal agreements in place because they provide you with a framework and a pathway, and they start those conversations about what could happen, where the rights will be, what your back end will be, what your participation will be. The other thing I see a lot with emerging producers is not really understanding what rights mean and what the value of them is and what the value is not. Quite often, if you come to an established producer with a property, they're going to say, okay, that's fantastic, but I want to option it from you, and then I want to purchase the rights. And sometimes emerging creators feel like that means they're being taken advantage of. But there are solid business reasons why a production company may want to take those rights. You can still negotiate your ability to have ongoing involvement in the project, your involvement as a writer, as a producer, as for subsequent seasons, for profit participation. You can negotiate all of that stuff while still giving this established producer the copyright so that they can apply for tax credits and funding. So it's not necessarily meaning that someone's taking everything and you're left with nothing. You can still negotiate that. So understanding those rights and what you can and can't do, and working with people who can help you get where you need to get to. And I think also understanding the market. Again, when I was at other companies, people would come to us with projects that were not at all related to what we did. So do your market research, figure out what your broadcast is looking for. If you're going to approach a producer, figure out what their strength is and if your property is going to fit with that. Just do your research. Don't have one pitch-o-matic for everybody. Tailor it to your audience. Think about who you're pitching to. Take informational interviews with people. Production execs are always happy to take those meetings because they want new voices and they want new content and they want to bring people up. But it is a challenging marketplace right now. I mean, it always is, but especially right now. So you have to, as Rod said, make your project undeniable.
Excellent. Peter?
I think a piece of advice for an emerging producer is this is all very overwhelming. There's a lot of information out there. There's rules. And I would say try not to do it alone. So, there's a business partner, there's mentors, advisors. The established people in the business get approached all the time to be mentors and advisors. So you've got to find an organic way to make it stick for you. I think, as someone mentioned, just be out there. Get out there, meet as many people as you can. Try to find someone who can work with you on a project so you can divvy up all of those rules. I don't think you need a lawyer to go through the rules. That stuff's online. Read it slowly, absorb it. But have some advisors that you can call on when something wonderful happens, and don't rely that. Don't let that be, say, someone you've just optioned something with. Okay, they're an established producer. They're going to mentor me. I've just given them my project. You want a third party advisor who isn't going to be in business with you, but someone you can rely on, because it's complicated. And I'd encourage you not to try and do it on your own. We've all probably been in this business for 15, 20, 25 years, and it's still overwhelming on all the rules. And they change. Rod's writing them new every year. So new ones, you think you got it, they're going to change. So that's my tip for an emerging producer.
And we want Rod to keep rewriting them. We keep asking him to do different things.
Seriously, I'm trying not to write them new each year, but yeah, the industry is dynamic, and so we're going to keep iterating. But what Peter says is exactly right. Finding those mentors are huge.
So, all right, I might get a little bit like therapy about this or something. But so my community that I work in primarily and have always worked in is Indigenous communities, Indigenous stories. That's my family. That's where I come from. That's where I work. And I feel like people who come from our communities respond to becoming producers by either becoming that person that's like, I can fight. I'm as smart as anybody. I can do it all myself. I'm gonna get in there and I'm gonna I don't need anybody. I'm gonna be the producer. I'm gonna be the writer. I'm gonna be the director. And then when there are things that we feel that we don't understand, we feel really bad because we feel like, oh, that means that I'm not independent. That means that I'm not strong. That means I don't know everything. And that can be really tough for people. And then there's other people within our community who have kind of it's like an equal but opposite response, where they're always all about kind of building community and bringing people in and looking for that support. And so I would say, if you're new in the industry, and really think about where you fall on that spectrum. And if you know that you're somebody who tends to kind of isolate yourself and beat yourself up for not knowing the things that you think that you should know, just remember that everybody starts out from that place, and that not everybody knows everything. And to really look to your peers for that support, build that community, because there's just really no other way to go ahead and do it. I realize I haven't talked about APTN at all, and I should just say a few things about APTN. I don't know if there's any Indigenous producers in the room, but APTN works almost exclusively with Indigenous production companies for all of our first window productions. We do an enormous amount of original production. We do a lot of documentary series. We have done more scripted production in the last couple of years in partnership with other broadcasters. For second window productions, we don't always have to work with Indigenous production companies. Sometimes we work with non-Indigenous companies, and there are interesting partnerships and ownership structures that come in that way, but that's primarily what we do. I think that's all I'll really...
And you have Lumi.
Oh yes, and we have a streaming service, APTN Lumi, it's interesting. In the last couple of years, we've done a ton of co-producing with other broadcasters, larger broadcasters, which has been really good for APTN as a channel, but also really good for our producers. And just for you as newer producers, it really used to be the case in the industry that if you have a connection with a broadcaster, you have a broadcaster who's starting to be interested in your project, you really need to be kind of loyal and faithful to them. One broadcaster is not going to really want anybody else being involved. But as we see, funds shrinking and the industry becoming more challenging in all kinds of different ways, everybody is really rushing in to try to find ways to co-finance projects, find creative solutions to different problems. So that's something I would definitely mention to all of you in the room.
And I just mentioned Bell Fund funded Womb Envy, a series a few years ago, and that was APTN Lumi and AMI, Accessible Media. It was both APTN and AMI that were co-broadcasters on that short-form digital series. So yeah, to your point, there's ways of making those collaborations happen.
For sure. So we're moving into our Q&A now. So maybe while, I think we've got some folks who are going to wander around the audience with some microphones. If you want to put up your hand if you're ready to ask a question. And while that's getting coordinated, I'll just ask the folks on the panel to talk about something else. So just feel free to jump in on this one. We don't need to go in order, no pressure for you. What are the factors that an emerging producer should consider when they're looking at building a partnership with maybe a larger production company, that mentor producer? You've come in with the idea, but you know that you need a bigger shop in order to support the production of your project. What are the questions that emerging producers should be asking of those companies, and what are the expectations that you should have of that other partner?
I can jump in on that. I think the most important thing to consider, and it sounds trite, but it's so very true, is find someone who shares your values. Like if you can spend a whole plane ride with someone and still like them at the end, that's important. You need someone who understands what you want to achieve, who shares your values, who they may not come from your background, but they understand your background, they champion your project. You really need someone who is going to share that cultural value with you and understand what you want to do. I think that's the most important thing. And again, it sounds really silly and straightforward, but it's so important to have. And then you can build on that, and then you build into the contractual relationship from there, and whatever else you have to do from there. I mean, it's it's a challenging market right now. The boom times of the streamer wars are over, but there is opportunity in that, and the opportunity in that is partnerships. The opportunity in that is co-productions. The opportunity in that is you cobble together a bunch of different financing from different places with different partners, and that can bring. On the downside, it can bring too many voices to the table, but can also bring interesting voices to the table who will think of things that you haven't thought of before, and think of places that your content might go that you haven't thought of before. I think the most important thing is just to get something made. You know, it may not be your dream project. It may not be the feature film that you had in mind from the time you were 10 years old. It may not be that. It may be in a genre that you're not comfortable with. It may be working with someone else on a project, but just get something made. Have your calling card, as Suzanne said, whether it's a 3-minute short or whether it's working with someone else on one of their projects, just get something made, get some credits under your belt, start building that resume.
I think what Lisa just said is exactly it. Just get that tangible product done and remind yourself it's never what's fair in a partnership. It's what you have the leverage to negotiate. So if you haven't done anything, your deal is not going to be as good as if you have. So the point is, think of the long game. Think of if you want to be a producer and that's what you want as a career, this one idea, don't be as precious about it. Get it made, find a way to get it made, and you can cut your teeth, gain experience. And then the next thing that you want to make, your deal's going to be a bit better because you made that one thing. So don't abandon the kind of, this is my purest vision. TV is collaborative. As Adam just said, even the broadcasters are saying, we can't just do this on our own anymore. There has to be this macro collaboration now. So I think the kind of abandon what's fair or what vision you have and be fluid and be adaptable.
Yeah, and I would add, when you do read those guidelines, because it sounds like you're going to spend a lot of time reading a lot of guidelines, you'll see a lot of the different funders, there are different eligibility requirements for a producer. Even just the fact that it is often the producer who is applying for the funding. As we said, you might be the creative, you might be the writer, but if you don't have the credits that are required to put in the application, you have to team with a producer, and they have to control the rights. So you have to be willing to give that over, and again, that's where that relationship and that trust comes in. So looking at those guidelines, they will often tell you, you need, 2 recent credits as a producer. You need, different funders will have different specific criteria. So you need to make sure the person you're talking with and sharing that plane ride with and want to collaborate with, that they have those credits, because then that might be a collaboration that will work for you and, again, get you that money. And you have to be thinking about the team. We're in Canada. It's 2023. We're expected to work together and collaborate and to have a diversity of voices, as Telefilm calls it. So think about your key creatives, on screen, off screen, who you're teaming with. I'm just trying to think in terms of, I guess, just that reality of building those relationships. The other thing as an emerging creator is teaming up with a producer. They can get stretched too thin, and they can only support and work on so many projects themselves, because a funder might say, we just funded you 6 months ago. We don't feel you have the bandwidth to support this other project. I've seen that before, and it's heartbreaking. So it's a real relationship. It's a real give and take for both of you, because they have to be willing, say if it's your creative project, to take you on, to spend maybe a year and a half without a whole lot of their own maybe creative projects going forward, because they're working on yours. So you just have to, again, communicate really clearly what you both want if you're there to support each other. Again, that's where that agreement comes into place, whether it's legal, whether it's something you've written yourself. Because you're thinking, like, in 3 years down the road, what's my credit going to be? What's your credit going to be? What's going to happen if we have a falling out? At what stage do we get to decide if we move forward for another year or we end this relationship? Like, just writing it all down is super helpful while you're having those initial conversations.
And I would just add to that quickly, understanding the timelines of new producers often don't understand the timelines involved in getting a project developed and off the ground. It can be years. So again, those relationships are so important. You're going to be in partnership with these people for years because it can take, I've seen projects 5 years in development before they finally get picked up for green light. It's a long process.
Oh, go ahead.
If we don't have a question, I'd like to also lend sort of a technical response
Sure.
to this question. So it is important that, also I'll go back to our rules and guidelines and regulations. If you're going to partner with a producer or a production company, the applicant production company must be a qualified corporation. That means that the company must be primarily in the business of producing Canadian film or video production. If you're in doubt, if the corporation has another form of business, etc., we recommend that you incorporate a one-off for the purpose of producing your film or production, so that you're not caught in the corporation being not qualified.
Excellent. I would also just add that the best relationships are always reciprocal. So when you're going to a producer, going to a partner, really understand what it is that you're bringing to the table and what it is that you're asking from them, what you're asking them to contribute. Ideally, it's an equal give and take. I will say sometimes you'll find producers or companies talk to you and treat you like they're doing you a huge favor, and sometimes they are. They might be doing you a huge favor by taking on your project. But if that's the feeling that you're getting, and you're going to be in a relationship with this producer, with this company for years, those are the relationships that really sour because they're built on a kind of an uneven power dynamic and relationship that can really curdle over time. So again, that's why I say really understand what it is that you're contributing and what it is that you expect from them, and do everything you can to just make sure that both parties understand that when you're first getting involved.
So we got hold on.
Oh, we've got a question here in the audience.
The mic's not, yeah, we've got a question. I've got a few online too, but.
Excellent.
Hi, thank you. My question is related to creating digital productions and applying for funding. How does the relationship with distribution kind of change when it comes to the digital space? And are there any specific pitfalls for producers to look out for in general with applying? Thank you.
So I'll answer that. The online only policy was actually in my notes to talk about, but I didn't have an opening, so thank you for that. So the way the online only shown in Canada requirement works is if your production is online only, you will have to have an agreement with a Canadian distributor, and the Canadian distributor can have the agreement with the online exhibitor. That distributor must be Canadian. There cannot be a non-Canadian distributor in that sort of chain. So it cannot be production company, Canadian distributor, non-Canadian distributor, and then online only exhibitor. That doesn't work. The distributor must be Canadian, and then the online-only exhibitor does not have to be Canadian. However, there are some stipulations for the online-only exhibitor. We have a list of acceptable online services on our website. It is always being populated. In order to apply to become on our list of online-only exhibitors, the online-only exhibitor representative from that company must fill out a form. We have a few stipulations. It sounds scary, but it isn't. Generally, there are 3 stipulations. The first one is the online-only exhibitor must have content from a third party on their website. So they cannot be only showing their own, or it cannot be only for one production or for one production company. They must have third-party content. The second stipulation is that they must be readily accessible for Canadians in Canada, and the third one is that Canada must be in their distributor lists, so where they're distributing the production or where they are showing the production. Yeah, so that's it. I hope that answers your question.
I've got another question over here, but I'm going to squeak in one from online.
Great.
What is a CAVCO ID?
So a CAFCO ID is, I don't know how to describe it. So a Canadian individual, any one of you who is Canadian, can apply for a CAFCO ID. It basically confirms that you are Canadian with us. So you would submit your CAFCO ID to the producer hiring you, and that is confirmation that you are Canadian. It is available for Canadian citizens and permanent residents of Canada. However, if you are a permanent resident of Canada, you will continuously have to provide us with a non-expired PR card, so an active PR card. If your PR card expires, we will contact you and ask, well, we won't contact you, but what happens is, let's say your PR card is expired, and let's say I'm a TCO and I see that tax credit officer, so if I'm a tax credit officer and I'm analyzing your application and I see that your PR card is expired, I will ask the producer to ask you to contact us. And then once you contact me, I will tell you your PR card is expired, and then we ask for an updated PR card.
Hot tip, they do expire. I've been caught on that where a CAVCO, a PR expires part with your production and it can throw your entire production offside. So it's a good idea to build that into your contract, both a slot for the CAVCO ID number and a clause that says you attest that you are and will remain a resident of Canada, as you know, their contract language that I won't bother to go into, but it's a super, super important thing. You need to make sure that all your producers and key creatives have this number and remain Canadian throughout the period of production.
Hi, I'm Khadija. Just wanted to say thank you for all of the information. I'm taking in and writing lots of notes. I had 2 questions initially, but it was kind of answered already. So it was just about like how, I guess, it's adapting. But I guess the real question that I have is like, why are there so many guidelines? Like genuinely, like just want to know like how that started and why it was like that.
I can start
you know
this.
What I mean?
I'm part of the problem. So there are guidelines, and we touched on it a little bit. There are just so many rules that we have to make sure, again, with funds, we have to report to our board of directors and the government of Canada of where this money is going. You know, you all seem great, but we don't know you. We don't know who you are, where you came from. All of these guidelines are basically saying, if we're going to part with this money, because some of this money is, you know, millions of dollars. It's real money. There has to be some sort of paper trail. So the guidelines are both to cover our butts in part. The guidelines are to educate you about, you need to know this, and then your financing agreement has many more rules and pages that you can either read or hire a business affairs or lawyer to go over. But the guidelines are basically meant as the transparency where we're offering money through programs, at least at the CMF. You are applying to a designated program. It's a POV doc fund, or it's a performance envelope program, or if it's the pilot program for racialized communities, all of those programs have budgets, and it's saying this is how you get that money. This is the minimum barrier to entry to even for you to even be considered to access those funds. So the reason why the guidelines exist is that transparency. I think the issue probably that happens is because of the patchwork quilt. There's not enough money in Canada, so to make your project, you need a little bit from column A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and all of those letters are separate and distinct with their own mandates and board of directors, and everyone has their own guidelines. So if you just read the CMFs, I apologize in advance, but that would be one. But if you have to read 5, 6, 7, 8, etc., I think that's, and all the deadlines are bespoke and different and don't always align because we're all separate entities. And we're all separate entities is just because there's not enough money from one place, and so you need to cobble it together.
I always find it useful also to think about the policy objectives of why there is public money and why there is Canadian content. It's twofold. There's a cultural objective, and that's to make sure that Canadians are telling these stories, because over the years there have been many, many, many attempts by producers to have not really Canadian stories being told or not really Canadian writers telling these stories. So the rules get more and more intense and complicated to try and make sure that this is Canadians telling the stories. Thank you. My mic died for a moment. And the other part is industrial policy, and that's to make sure that these are Canadian jobs and Canadian taxpayers. So those two policies combined mean that the guidelines, whether they're CAVCO or Ontario Creates or CMF or Bell Fund or any of the many guidelines, are to ensure that they're meeting the policy objectives, because there are bad players out there who are going to try to get their projects through without meeting those policy objectives. So it's like building a better mousetrap, right?
I'm just going to quickly ask one more online question. That's about the PPRC. Rod, can you talk about the PPRC? What is it and how are you eligible?
Sure. So the pilot program for racialized communities, I think, is now in its third year. So I think it started in 21, 22. And so it is, again, a selective program at the CMF. So we have a variety of programs. We have first come, first serve. We have an envelope program for broadcasters, which is automatic, and then selective, which is basically the evaluation criteria are in the guidelines. So we will be ranking you on X, Y, and Z, and this is the respective weight. It is open to members, is open to companies owned and controlled by members of racialized communities. All those definitions are in the guidelines. And it's something, again, that I would say we've been evolving the rules of this program since it happened. I think our consultation with racialized communities have really informed the policies and the objectives of this program. It's one of these items at the CMF where we always, this is why we have 35 plus initiatives. I think we don't want it to be complex, but we also want to keep responding to the needs of the industry. So it's almost like this program obviously has a huge need to remedy or to help remedy historic barriers to access at the CMF. We also see it as a floor. We see this as a minimum amount of money for these communities. I think there's other programs that have incentives that can also sweeten the incentives to, say, a broadcaster. If you hire or you engage a company to do project X and it's from a member of a racialized community, there can be benefits for the broadcaster. So I think when we look at the CMF, there are always a bunch of options, both kind of carrots and sticks. In terms of eligibility, there's a lot. Obviously, I think the guidelines are 20 pages. But again, there's the Canadianness. There's the you must be like all CMF programs, for-profit taxable corporation. And again, you have to be owned and controlled by a member of a racialized community. I'm trying to think in terms of writer and director. I'm going to probably get this wrong, but you guys read the guidelines and double check this. But I believe 2 out of 3 of the writer, director, and producer also have to be a member of a racialized community. I think the biggest thing is when you get into the guidelines, there's always the usual CMF things, and every different program has its own mandate. So it's like, oh, this is a POV doc fund. I can't have a big budget drama series, right? So you have to read it start to finish. But it's something, again, that the CMF is really proud of, but a lot more work to be done.
And also persona ID, right? They have to have their persona ID profiles filled out.
Sorry, thank you, Adam. This is great to have this panel. It takes a village. Our persona ID initiative is a self-identification tool. I think years ago, we had a system where it's like producers, like, I think this person is on my project and I think they identify as X. That's problematic. So persona ID is obviously a way for everyone involved in the project to say, I self-identify as a member of this community, and that's kind of your entry point into a lot of our programs. So we have initiatives for gender, diversity. I think it's also something with regards to data. The CMF, obviously we consult and we gain a lot of information there, and that's great. But I think actually having the hard data of who is applying to the CMF, and more importantly, who is not applying to the CMF, is also going to inform our policies in the future too.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering if it was necessary, for example, me as an individual or as part of a collective, if it's necessary to incorporate a business or make yourself a business, what the benefits are and at what point you should be thinking about doing that. To anyone that can answer.
Do you mean if it's necessary for you to incorporate a production company, or if you can make the film yourself?
If you should incorporate a production company.
So absolutely you must incorporate a production company, and the production company must be primarily in the business of producing Canadian film or video productions.
The most common structure would be to have a parent company that you incorporate, and then incorporate single-purpose companies for each production. And the real benefit of that is that each production is distinct. Your accounting is ring-fenced. Your liability is ring-fenced. Most of the funders are going to require a single-purpose company to make sure that the money they're giving your production is only being spent on that production and not on, your mortgage and whatever else you're spending money on. So that, yes, if you want to apply for funding, you need to incorporate a company.
At the CMF, we have one. So yes, you have to be a taxable corporation to get money from the CMF. The one, we do not want to pay anyone's mortgage, so just take note, all of you. And so the one wrinkle, though, is for a lot of programs, we don't require it at application because obviously if people don't want to incorporate initially, if they're they're going to start out. However, if you're selected for funding, before we cut you that check, you need to be a corporation.
I was going to say it's the same for Bell Fund, for example, and John from IPF is in the room. I think it's the same for IPF. At application, you don't need to be incorporated, but certainly you have to be prepared to do so if you are selected for funding.
The other thing I'm going to add is season 1 of One Stop, episode 1, is devoted to exactly that topic, should I incorporate, so I direct you there.
And it's available online?
I think so.
Yes.
All right.
Hi, I'm Lana, and you've all touched on this a little bit about finding partners, in particular business partners, people who handle the business part of, your creative push to get a project done, and in order to help you navigate through your gates. But I admit, I find this process a little confusing myself, and so I would appreciate if you have some tips about where and when to find this business partner if you haven't found that wonderful person coming out of school, or you've married them, or whatever it is, to get to that place. Thanks.
I'll jump in and just say, partly it's going to be from events like this, as we said, also joining organizations like WIFT, Women in Film and Television, CMPA, we've talked about that. There are some opportunities at the CMPA for emerging before you become kind of an incorporated company. Also, events through the Academy. I'd encourage everybody to, have a WIFT membership, have an Academy membership. It just makes you feel part of the community. You get invited to things. You can go on walks. Those are places where there are a lot of other emerging creators doing the same thing. So just having those conversations. And also, yeah, I totally get it. It's super confusing. I'm just surprised nobody asked yet what a tax credit is, to be honest, because I do get that question. Just so you know, it's kind of like filing your own personal income taxes. You wait, and that money will come back to you eventually. But you have to. I do get that question a lot, and when people are building tax credits into their finance schemes, we always tell them as well to put some bank loan money in there, because you will have to wait a little bit. It's not automatic. So yeah, it is tough. And one other thing is just maybe there's so many funders. Think about the type of content you want to produce and then start to narrow it down. So is it a feature film? Maybe then telefilm. Is it a kids series? Maybe it's a Shaw Rocket Fund. Is it web series? Well, now there's a few different options out there for web series. But again, where are you at in your web series? Is it doc? Is it fiction? So start to whittle it down and then get to where you maybe have 2 or 3 funders where you think you could apply for the money, and those are the guidelines you're going to read, and then those are the people you're going to try and connect with who are like-minded, who might get you to that application.
I was going to say something a little bit more blunt in terms of, you're right, it's really tricky, and there's not a book or a roadmap or a course or meeting them, meet your spouse. So it's really tricky. And the word is just, you have to hustle. You have to get out there. You have to, again, and Lisa, you correct me if I'm going off sides, but it's basically saying, become a fan of Canadian content, consume a lot of content, find out who produced the things that you like. What do you want to do? Was that project nominated for Canadian Screen Awards? Okay, if it is, who's the producer? You can look online. Once you see the producer's name online there, you can say, does the CMPA have a database of the producers and what their contact information is? Do they accept cold calls and it's about using the interwebs and getting out there and hustle and saying, can I take you out for a cup of coffee before you start your day? Who's going to turn down a cup of coffee that someone pays for? It's just about getting out there and hustling and saying, be nice, don't get a, restraining order. No one wants that. But I would say everyone out there has been here. You are not alone. Everyone has started, and everyone up here and who's doing well at one point got a break. Everyone knows that. And maybe you get someone on the wrong day, but then go to them on another day or go to another person. But I think there has to be a level of resilience if you're going to be a producer in Canada. And it's not about, it's not going to go your way all the time. You just have to keep at it over and over again. And again, be undeniable, be resilient.
And I was just going to add, I think there's a couple levels of partnership. I think starting with mentorship and just advice, and I can't speak highly enough of WIFT. They are great for this. It's a great place to meet people in the business who are willing to mentor you and talk to you about how the business works. So that's one level. And then that can get you to the next level of finding an actual business partner. But I think those are the two kind of levels, and being out there, meeting people, having these conversations.
So we've got a lot of questions, so I'm just going to, so that we can actually get through them, I'll do one online, and then I've got someone, and there's a few others.
Should we try to do rapid fire short answers?
That would be perfect.
All right, everybody just jump in if this is your question and keep it short.
Got it. I think it just means we're going to talk. We just have to be mindful of the interpreters as well, which is obviously critical.
Okay, not too rapid fire.
A question for you, Adam, is from online. There's been a lot of talk about broadcasters. Where does a producer or creator find what the list of eligible broadcasters is?
Oh, a list of eligible broadcasters.
CRTC.
The CRTC website? Is that?
Sorry, the CRTC does have a website, and it's there, but it's a little bit
opaque,
hiding in plain sight. There's a lot of information on that website. So I would just say, I think the biggest element I would say is, if you're going to be engaging with the broadcaster, I think to confirm with them at the outset, are you licensed by the CRTC? I think that is kind of the first stab. In terms of the list, I'm trying to think the Canadian Association of Broadcasters would probably have a list. The CRTC website, not to disparage it, but that website can be pretty, again, makes my guidelines look like a walk in the park. So best of luck. But again, Google is your friend.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you very much for all of your incredible information that we're rapidly writing down here. But I had one question. You mentioned a recent production. How recent does your last production have to be in order to qualify?
I think I referenced that. Again, it's one of those things with the guidelines. Each funder has their own guidelines, and for instance, Bell Fund doesn't have that requirement. I'm speaking of, for instance, Ontario Creates, I believe, have very specific guidelines in terms of how many credits in what role. Often I've seen kind of in the last 5 years kind of thing quoted. So it was just about making sure that you know the guidelines for the particular fund you want to go for, because that might be one of them. And before you firm things up with that person you just had that plane ride with, and they're going to be your next producer, and then you find out, well, they haven't really produced anything yet. So they're a great friend, but they can't get you the funding. So just to check the guidelines, because they're all different. Sorry.
And on the broadcaster side, I would say it's kind of soft. So there aren't any specific guidelines around that. But if you're working with somebody who hasn't produced anything recently, then a broadcaster is going to look at them and say, like, oh, how active are they? How experienced are they? Are they ready for this project? So it's more of a conversation.
Kanya Chen, creative producer. I'm right over here. Over here. Hi. Thank you, everyone. Really, really helpful information. I do have a question about, everyone seems to be talking a lot about how very difficult the guidelines are just to understand in general. For neurodiverse creatives or producers, that can become exponential. And so one of the questions I have is, are there any intentions of having any type of programs or support systems for those people? I know that a lot of people have already created their own personal ones, but it would be great to see those systems or supports being offered as well.
So great question. So at the CMF, there's an initiative called Accessibility Support, which is exactly designated for people to apply to the CMF. So it's on our website, Accessibility Support. There's, again, the guidelines for accessibility support are as lean as possible, but more importantly, there's an email and a number to call, and we can help you out.
On the CAFCO side, we don't have a program catered for accessibility. However, if you have any sort of accessibility barriers, reach out to us and we will do everything that we need to do to accommodate and help you through the process.
I would just add as well, I just met with Winnie, who's running the disability screen office here in Toronto, and Bell Fund is funding through our industry development program the guidelines for the disability screen office. So again, there's going to be, a lot of those conversations are happening in terms of building some of this into the processes and the guidelines and budgets. So more to come for sure.
Excellent. Do we have time for more questions? Three more questions. Okay, please go ahead.
Hi there. Thank you all so much. I just really quickly wanted to ask a follow-up regarding the CAVCO office's online-only requirements, specifically relating to the need to have a Canadian distributor. So if you're creating episodic content and you're able to get some kind of maybe not a license fee, but at least a guarantee that your production will be aired on a digital platform that's accessible in Canada, are you still required to have that Canadian distributor? And if so, I was hoping you could just sort of unpack why that requirement is in place, because obviously if you're creating episodic content and then you're getting a distributor on board, that suddenly becomes another stream through which you start losing money coming back to you. And so if you could just unpack that online only a little bit more, that would be great.
So I'll circle back to the culture aspect of it. So many of our guidelines and our rules are designed so that we are encouraging Canadian content, encouraging Canadian culture. The Canadian distribution stipulation is in place so that there is an agreement with a Canadian company. Otherwise, the online exhibitors are not all Canadian. Many of them are actually not Canadian. So that rule for the Canadian distributor, that need for a Canadian distributor, is to ensure that we are making business with Canadians.
Can I speak to that? Sorry, I'm a colleague from CAFCO. Just like the reason that it exists actually is because we're stuck with it. The regulations were written a long time ago, and the distributor requirement was for feature films. The only way that we could allow online content without changing the regulations, which is not something we were able to do at the time in 2017 when we did this, was by funneling. The Shown in Canada clause has two things: either CHC licensed broadcaster or a Canadian distributor that is written in the income tax regulations. So the only way we could allow things to be shown online is to use the distributor one. So it's literally because we're stuck with it. We know it's dumb, and we don't like it either. And it will change someday. But literally, that's the only way we could allow the online only, was via a distributor. You don't have to give away anything to a distributor. It doesn't have to be a big distributor that's going to eat your lunch. It just has to be a separate company that's a distribution company that will flow it through to the online service.
That's kind of an evergreen answer for Canadian policy, and we're stuck with it and it's dumb. And so this is, again, the rationale is often, it is as simple and as mechanical as the bigger rule can't be changed, so we're going to find kind of a workaround.
Because we're all working within our own frameworks of terrible guidelines and structures that we're trying to be compliant with as well.
Preach, Adam.
So it's not a matter of changing CAVCO guidelines. It's a matter of changing income tax code regulations way beyond CAVCO.
It'll happen someday.
Excellent. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. I don't. Is it on? Yes. I want to thank you for this session, but my question is probably already answered in pieces. But if I understand correctly, a lot of these organizations are about providing additional funding past the threshold of a distribution license or a proof of market interest. So I was wondering, do you have any specific advice on how to get past that threshold with distribution? So getting that license fee, for example, which type of position should you or person should you reach out to start that kind of conversation, for example, or is it also some kind of application platform?
I'm going to jump in and just say, because it's super hard, you guys want to get your content out there, and whether it's a broadcast license you need or market interest from a distributor or a digital channel, which might be the case for Bell Fund, for example. One thing I'd suggest is look at our annual report in terms of Bell Fund. Each year we publish an annual report. It lists every project we funded the previous year, who the production company was, who the digital platform or broadcaster or distributor was. You can see the companies that receive Slate development money, for example, and all those digital series, so you can see if it's on GEM or APTN's Lumi and who the production company was. It's also a good resource for you to, maybe you can check out those shows. Maybe you can reach out to those production companies and ask them for 10 minutes. You did it. You achieved Bell Fund financing. How did you do it? We also have a list on our website of digital channels that have streamed series that we funded as well, because our list isn't the same as CAVCO's list necessarily. So again, we just want you to land on a channel that will help you to find your audience. So we have kind of a different way, that we view the channels, but that's my suggestion is check out the credits of the shows you like, check out people's annual reports to see who they actually funded, who got the money last year.
And last question. Go ahead.
Hi, so my question is going to bring us back to the bare basics of a need to know for emerging producers. But when you guys were talking about rights earlier and the importance of rights, would you be able to expound a little bit on why they're so important and how they benefit the producer, and are they still as important for someone who's like just trying to create content to build credits, like working on short film projects, things of that nature?
I can answer that, and then maybe you want to follow up too. It's foundational. Every person along the chain of your project is going to need to know that you have a clear chain of title. So it could be as simple as a concept that you developed. You can, copyright it, and it can be as simple as that, or it can be as complicated as, life rights. You want to tell somebody else's story. You have to negotiate those life rights with that person. Because as you go along in the process and you want to sell it to a broadcaster or a distributor or anybody else, they're going to want to know that you have clear chain of title, so that ultimately someone else doesn't come in and say, wait a minute, I have a piece of that, and you do not have the rights to make that production, and all your financing falls apart, they sue you, like it can be a disaster. So it's absolutely foundational to have a clear chain of title from day one.
So think of rights as intellectual property. It's property. Just like a piece of property that a house is on. You can't develop that land if you don't have the right to do that. And if you build something on that land, then you're going to try and sell it or license it to someone else. They need to know that you actually controlled that, so that when they give you money, no one's going to come after them later for a piece of it. And so when you look at your project, even the 3-minute film, it's unlikely that you've done it all yourself. Everyone who's touched that has a right to their creation. The person who designed a costume, they actually own the right to that costume. You might have given them money, but did you have a contract that says, oh, and by the way, I'm going to take this money from you and I'm going to give you all the rights to my costume? The person who worked your camera, anytime someone's touched your project, they have a right to their labor, to the fruits of their labor. So you want to make sure you have something in writing that says, you know what, I have it now, and I have the right to license it or sell it, so that when you do that deal, you can say with conviction to that buyer, it's all mine, it's now yours, no one's going to come after you.
That's a great point. It's the two pieces. It's the underlying rights and it's the grant of rights in all of your contracts. Anybody who has rights to their work, they have to grant it to you, so you have that clear chain.
Yeah, don't just stop saying, okay, I've got to deal with this writer, and then you've got, all your friends helping because you can't pay them. They're helping, but you still want something in writing confirming that you control that property.
And that's going to set you up for success down the line too, because you never know, even when you're starting at the beginning of a project, you don't know where it's going to go or what the potential of it is. And so if you end up, having a piece of content that does incredibly well and you get an offer to have it broadcast down the line or who knows what, having those rights will allow you that freedom to be able to make those sales, to be able to do whatever you want with it down the road. Even if you're thinking, I'm just going to make this with my friends and put it on YouTube, maybe in 5 years, that's going to turn into something different and you're going to have a lot more freedom if you have those rights.
But sadly, it's not bulletproof. I mean, that's one of the prices of success. If you have a super successful piece of content, someone's going to come out of the woodwork and say, wait a minute, I touched that at one point. So you have to be prepared with that chain of title because you can still, trust me, I know, you can still get sued for content that you 100% own.
All right, well, that was our last question. So thank you all so much for coming up here and answering the questions from everyone today. And thanks to all of you for bringing your questions to us.
We're going to continue with that theme of creative possibilities and business challenges in session 2. We're going to roll up our sleeves together and look at more nuts and bolts. I'll be your moderator for today, and my name is John Vacar. I'm with the Business and Rights Group, and I'm dealing specifically with digital programming on our team. And I would like to send out a big thank you to our Zoom participants. There's about 40 across the country, and another team member from BNR, Anya McKenzie, is acting as the moderator on those sessions. So thank you, Anya, and thank you to all of our participants across Canada. And I'd also say that if you have questions at any time, we have CBC colleagues and others. There's probably people at your table that you could ask, so don't hesitate. We're here to have a conversation. Just before I get to the panelists that have joined us today, I'm going to outline some learning objectives for not only this panel, but after we get back from lunch for the hour and a half after lunch. Those are understanding what it's like working with broadcasters and funders and other partners. We've already touched on a lot of that. And also new cultural contexts, how to support authentic storytelling as well as a business approach. And you've seen that theme this morning. We're going to continue our high-level look at financing and things like CMF and tax credits. And why are we doing all this? I think another theme that came through was this paves the way for success in this business, is just acquiring that knowledge, putting it together, thinking it through, coming up with your partners. So that's a big objective here. I'm just going to touch on briefly the case study, which I know you're going to read, but the links should be shared, I think, online with our Zoom participants as well. We're going to be talking about a fictional production company after lunch called Real Island Entertainment, and they're developing what's currently a short doc called Doubles Diaspora with a 20-minute anticipated runtime. Now, the case study calls the Doubles the tastiest snack to ever arrive in Canada from the islands. And the film will look at the origin of the humble doubles and the South Asian diaspora behind the street food hit. And there's more details in a really robust case study with your materials. The creators in that case study self-identify as being from an equity-deserving group, and they're running a fairly successful YouTube channel. Real Island, the production company, is currently thinking about partnering with a more experienced production company to bring that project to life. So there's more details, but that's a quick high-level overview. Now, just so that I don't give the wrong impression, I should note that programming strategies at all broadcasters, including CBC, change from time to time. So while CBC has a strong track record on short docs, recently the focus has changed to science and nature docs that support the nature of things. And hand in hand with that is an emphasis on bringing in diverse and emerging creators into that area, which typically has been a bit sort of more dominated by the traditional filmmakers, and that we're looking to change. Okay, so before we get into the deep dive of the case study, we're going to hear from our panel, where we're going to hear more about this morning's themes, and probably some useful hints that are going to help you with the case and thinking through it. Now, we have their full bios in the materials, but quickly we have Janice Daw from Visible, Tracy Doyle from Cavco, Monica Sentensky from Ontario Creates. Yasmin could not be with us. Julie Veneris, sorry. I'm reading off my notes when I should be looking here. Julie Veneris from CMF and Monica from Ontario Creates. Sorry? From Telefilm /CMF. Okay. We always deal on CMF issues, so that's why. Yeah, sorry. I left CMF when it merged with Telefilm, so there was going to be a joke there somewhere, but I just didn't manage it. Okay, so and as I send questions your way, please don't hesitate to talk more about what your organization does. But I'm trying to keep the intros brief. Janice, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to throw out this question, and you can talk about Visible as well, if you like. So let's imagine I'm an emerging creator with a fantastic documentary idea like the one that's in the case study. Why should I care about business affairs? Can't I just launch right in to making what I want to make?
Am I good? Well, business affairs has become a word that when I began my career quite a long time ago in the 80s, it was a term we never heard of. Producing kind of encapsulated both the creative and the business side of the work, and most producers were pretty well versed that they'd have to do some of the business to move their creative forward. But because of the Canadian funding system that many of you here want to tap into, and it has introduced a lot of rules and frameworks that we have to work through. And as you got a glimpse of, it's a pretty complex set of rules. Trust me, I still read Cavco guidelines every year. So why would you need business affairs? You may not need it right at the beginning. Let's say you've got a great pitch for a concept that you own, that you have the rights for, and you have an idea of how you can execute it, and you have an idea of who your market will be and what market partner might be the gatekeeper to the audience you're trying to reach. You can go pretty far on your own steam without necessarily engaging a business affairs professional, a financial type consultant, or a lawyer. But there will probably come a time where you have an expression of interest, let's say from a market partner, let's say for Doubles Diaspora, it's CBC Digital saying, we love you guys. You guys seem great. You've got a great idea. We'd love to have this on GEM. And then then it gets real about, well, have you got a budget? Have you got a financing plan? And some of you may, and some of you may not even know how to put together a financing plan or what that model might look like. And that's kind of the point where you go, geez, somebody on our team needs to know the business side of this. So at some point you will need guidance, and it is actually good to know early on that you do need that kind of guidance so you can identify some people at events or through your network who could help you if you get a yes on your journey. And then once you get that yes or some market interest, you might then move forward with some kind of arrangement, either with a senior producing company, a lawyer, a business affairs, to help you navigate what's going to come next.
Janice, a quick follow-up on that. At Visible, do you deal with producers a lot at the development stage, or do you get more involved at the production stage?
It's very hard for us in a small business situation to take on everybody who's got an idea, who hasn't yet sold that idea through to somebody interested in funding it either for development or production. Our phones would just be ringing all the time and we wouldn't be able to do our work. So we've kind of made a sort of a threshold at Visible where we say, we will help producers who are making the kinds of content that we as a team, somebody in our team really loves, because we have to feel a passion too. And we may invest some of our resources up front to help you on your journey before you have any money. But that's on a case-by-case situation. And many of the people that we work with today are people that me or one of my team members has met in a room just like this, or at prime time, or at Hot Docs, and we've felt, okay, this is a person with a great idea. They seem to be talking in a reasonable way about how to move it forward, and they actually have some interest from CBC that they can turn into actual real money at some point, and then we can help them.
That's terrific. Yasmin from our unscripted programming group was going to be here with us today, but unfortunately she couldn't. I guess if I was going to give a Coles Notes version of why development is important, I'll give it a go, but if there's anyone, my colleagues or anyone on the panel that wants to jump in afterwards, feel free. So why would you want to engage in development? Well, you may have pitched an idea, you may have the kernel of an idea, but there could be aspects of it that need to be further explored. And the broadcaster may say, well, I want to see that person on camera. I want to know what they're like. That's one example. There could be further research. You might need access. So, for example, if you're working with an Indigenous community, we'd want to know that you have the support of that community, and that they are okay, for example, with you filming there, or having elders participate in the film, and all kinds of safeguards around that as well. So those are a couple of examples of what you would want to take care of in development. And ultimately, you're trying to just improve the project, get the story arc filled out, so that you can get a green light for production. That's my Coles Notes version of that topic. And we'll probably, in the case study, there'll be more discussion of all the aspects around that, because I'm just getting at the surface level, and there's going to be more in there after lunch. Tracy and Monica, I'm going to toss this next one to you. So let's say that development process has been engaged, and it's going well, and I've got to deliver, according to my contract with the broadcaster. They want me to scope out, okay, if this actually went into production, what's the potential production budget, and also how would we finance this? So I've been told in this process that I should explore tax credits. Now, do you have any tips on me as I'm embarking on the beginning of that journey of tax credits? And if you want to pull in any examples from this case study that we're going to be diving into after lunch, that's fine. But if you want to talk more generally, that's okay too. Tracy, should we start with you?
Sure. I actually came up with some tips specific to the case study. Obviously, there's lots of other things, but these are the things that jumped out at me when I read the initial part of the case study. So one is that there's no running time minimums for the CPTC. So I think, like Monica, that's different for Ontario. So for the federal tax credit, productions of any length are fine, and there's no cost minimums or anything like that for the domestic tax credit. One thing I wanted to mention is this is presented as a documentary. It's a 20-minute documentary, and so that would likely work from a genre perspective for the tax credit. But if, for instance, a show like this was going to be made into a series, it would have the potential, based on the description, to come across more like what we refer to as a lifestyle human interest production. It's kind of, we say that instead of reality television, because you may notice if you read our guidelines that on the list of excluded production genres, reality is not allowed. However, you should read the definition of reality because it's very, very narrow. It's like CPAC or, you know, like things that are caught on camera, closed captioning, or, you know, cameras that already exist somewhere or something. Again, I mentioned earlier that, you know, that distribution thing is dumb. So like sometimes we work around our regulations. And this is one of the ways as well, is that we don't, reality TV for the tax credit isn't what you think of as reality TV. We call that lifestyle human interest, and it is eligible. So this kind of show could really potentially come across as a lifestyle human interest if it was a series, you know, where you're following people around trying to accomplish something in their business or whatever. It could come out as a doc, but it could also come out as a lifestyle. It really depends how you do it. And so if it was a lifestyle program, your subjects could very well be considered leads. And then you get into all the stuff Hiba talked about earlier today, where those leads have to be Canadian, they need CAFCO IDs, and all that kind of stuff. So just be aware that the, you know, doc and lifestyle, and it's different for CMF. Like CMF also has lifestyle, or sorry, their doc definition is different than ours, and all this reality lifestyle stuff would be caught up in the doc definition at CMF. So these are things that you need to pay attention to. We don't put the genre of the production on our certificates, so it doesn't matter from a funding perspective with other organizations what the genre is. But for us, it could have an impact on your key creative requirements and the key creative points. So I just wanted to mention that. We already talked about online productions a fair bit this morning. So because this is with GEM, you wouldn't need the distributor in the middle because GEM is run by CBC, which is a CRTC licensed broadcaster, so you're all good to go there. But as we discussed earlier, if you were going to show it on an online service that was not connected to a broadcaster, then you would need the Canadian distributor in the middle, doing the deal with the online service. I think I'll leave it there for now.
Okay. Oh, you can hear me. Great. So what I have to say is more general things with regards to financing, not specific to this case per se, but in any case, when you're in development and you're thinking, okay, now we have to possibly come up with a production budget, you also have to come up with production financing. And the Ontario Film and Television Tax Credit, it's tax credits, and even the CPTC from CAFCO, the federal credit, is an after-the-fact kind of financing. You don't get it up front, paid up front. And in fact, you would have to have all of your financing secured and locked before you could even apply for the tax credits, okay? Now my maybe there's 3 tips are you do need to know the nature of the financing in your financing plan. That's very, very important. Because certain types of financing will reduce your tax credits, just right off the bat. So things like grants, forgivable loans, labor deferrals, all of these things, if they're in your financing plan, will reduce both the provincial, so the OFTTC, and the CPTC, the federal credit. So that's something to keep in mind. The second step is, okay, what is my second step again? The second step is you should always do your provincial tax, figure out what your provincial tax credits are going to be first before you calculate the federal tax credit. Why? Because the provincial tax credit is deemed assistance. It reduces or grinds your federal tax credit. So in the order of things, you have, well, I guess in general, when you're in development, you're going into production, you have to figure out where are we getting this money from? What kind of money is it? Is it equity investments? Is it a loan? Is it a grant or a recoupable advance from some agency? And are any of that type of financing, would it be considered assistance or would it reduce my tax credits? Okay.
Then try and figure out the provincial tax credit first, and then you can do the calculation for the for the federal credit, the CPTC. Now, it is important that, like, this was really my first tip, but you hear this from everybody. You really do have to, unfortunately, read the guidelines and try and familiarize yourself with the rules for tax credits. You do need to come up with a pretty accurate, I would advise you to try and come up with a very accurate estimate, because often your other financiers, be they the broadcaster or Telefilm or someone, is going to ask the producer to put their full tax credit into the financing for your show. So you don't want to overestimate your tax credit and then find out, oh, we screwed up and now we have a $20,000 shortfall or something in the financing. So it is important, unfortunately, that you have to read the fun guidelines. And tax credits are written into the Corporation Tax Act, like they're written into corporation tax law. We have sort of plain English guidelines to help you understand what all that stuff means, but the actual rules are written in corporation tax law. So the good thing is the tax credits are entitlement-based financing. So as long as your production and your company meet all the requirements laid out in the law, you're going to get the tax credit. That makes this type of financing very reliable, and banks are comfortable lending you money against that, okay? But it does behoove you to get a very accurate estimate of what the tax credits are going to be. I think those are my basic tips at the financing stage. You don't want to get into sort of a circular. You can get into this sort of circular situation. You do need to know the type of financing that's going to fund your production, okay? Because one piece might move out. You might have, okay, we didn't get that grant, so the director's going to defer all their fees. That covers it. Well, it might cover it on paper, but then it affects both the tax credits, and then they go down, and then you're short another $10,000 or something. So it does help you to have the rest of the financing locked and know what kind of financing it is. Anyway, I'll leave it there.
Can I mention just one thing, just in case there's anyone who's not familiar with like the whole reducing the tax credit thing, referred to often as the grind. It grinds your tax credit down, like Monica said. But some people think when they hear that it's a one-for-one reduction. So just be assured that it's not. So like, if you get a $10,000 grant, it doesn't reduce your tax credits by $10,000. It's not one-to-one. It's a calculation. And so you're not losing the same value of the grant or the forgivable loan or the assistance, we call it. It's not one-for-one. So it's not as bad as it sounds.
Thanks very much, Tracy and Monica. I think it's reinforcing the theme of complexity and partnering with people that perhaps have experience in that area to help make sure that you don't fall into any financial pitfalls. Julie, I'd like to turn to you. With Telefilm acting as administrator for lots of CMF programs, you've probably seen all kinds of applications come into the corporation, into the organization. I'm wondering if we had a lot of interest this morning around online exhibition and online creations and web series. Is there anything from the Telefilm perspective that you would like to shine a light on?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Veneris, and I'm at Telefilm. So Telefilm Canada is a separate agency, just to make things even more complicated, that administers the Canada Media Fund. So Rod, who is here this morning, him and his company write all of the guidelines and the policies, and then we actually are the ones that do the interface with the producers. We intake the applications, we help you with all of the guideline questions you have, and we're the ones that bring you to contract and pay you. So that's why, just to make note, that you're going to go to the CMF website to get all of the policy and information, but you're going to apply via Telefilm's website. And if you need assistance with guidelines or anything, please call Telefilm anytime. We have a whole coordination department that's dedicated to answering client questions. And my colleague Shelley Coltish is here, who's extremely knowledgeable and wonderful, and her and I are always available for calls. And so that's the first thing, sort of how that's structured. And we have funds that are based on phases. So we have we have some pre-development funds. Pre-development meaning you don't have a broadcaster that's giving you any money right now. Maybe they're a little bit interested, but they're not ready to take that step with you financially. So those funds are really interesting for emerging producers often, because the only sort of requirement that's third party is a letter of interest from a broadcaster. So those are, and we can fund a project, just to answer your question, John, we can fund a project that's ultimately meant for an online streaming, as long as it's owned and controlled by Canadian companies. So a project for GEM, for Crave, it just can't be Netflix or anything like that, because of course, as Rod mentioned this morning, we get our money from Canadian companies and Canadian governments. So, so we don't really make a huge distinction in development, as long as it fits into our guidelines and our genre rules. So pre-development, again, there's a couple of different varieties of pre-development funding. We have like a general pre-development, and then we have targeted pre-development. So the targeted ones are more, the policies apply to different groups and communities. So we have an Indigenous pre-development. We have a PPRC pre-development, which is pilot program for racialized communities. So those are specifically for people that are part of a certain community. So I guess when you're developing a project, have a look at the pre-development guidelines, figure out how you're going to maybe structure the project, like who thought of it, how was it developed, and then look at our guidelines and see which of our pre-development funds you might be more suited for. And just keep in mind, all of our funds, unfortunately, are really popular, very oversubscribed often. So you have to start talking as soon as possible to the broadcasters. We open our doors in April, and we close them in December. So it's a pretty narrow window of time. So it's never too early to start talking to broadcasters for those letters of interest. They're limited in how many they can issue. So, for pre-development, I believe they can only issue 2. And it's per group. So if you go to Bell, you can't get one that's for a subsidiary broadcaster under Bell. Like, it's the whole corporate group that can only get 2. So you can imagine how many people across Canada are clamoring for these letters of interest. But if you do happen to be the lucky ones that can get them, it's $35,000 up to 84% of your pre-development budget. So typically you could fund some writing, some pitch materials, and a demo. And so we want you to be able to develop things that you can then shop to different broadcasters and try to garner interest. And then the next stage is development. And for development, you do require broadcast license fees. And for the Canada Media Fund, that is sort of the hardest barrier. So for people that were asking questions about how to get those broadcasters to fund you, that is the million-dollar question that everybody has. That's what I hear mostly from the producers, the challenge and the difficulty of actually being able to get money from a broadcaster. So we can't really, there is no one garden path. Like it is, like Rod said, it is a hustle, it is hard, but if you persevere, try to at least get the pre-development, and then hopefully if they like it, they can bring you to the next phase, which is development, where they have to actually give you more funding. So maybe I'll stop there before I go on to.
Sure, go ahead. Thanks, Julie.
I just want to pick up on the idea of development, because a lot of you guys in the room may have an idea and you just want to go into production. And that's not an unreasonable idea if it's a very small production, and maybe if you've done things before. But in this story of Doubles Diaspora, this story that you will read, CBC has taken some interest in this story. And the conversation that CBC is having with the producer who comes to them is, we're interested in developing it. And you guys need to be really attuned to listening to the words coming out of people's mouths, because when they say development, they're saying, that's the path we're talking about here. Don't get ahead of yourself. There might be a very good reason why CBC wants to develop it. They may be getting to know you. And try not to feel impatient or that they're not coming on the way that you want them to. This is really a wonderful opportunity to work some things out in your creative, but also to develop that relationship with your broadcast partner who's buying into development. And you don't have to know every single little bit of the guidelines to keep moving forward. Usually your executive will put you in touch with a business affairs person at CBC or another broadcast entity, and they can give you some tips on how they see you can complete your development financing and some ideas of models. Some of the broadcasters very much want you to go towards a PPRC type model. Others might be saying, no, we'll co-fund with our CMF envelope and our broadcast envelope for development. So just have a conversation. Know that there's CMF funding out there and all of that, but listen to what your broadcast partner is suggesting as the path for you.
Oh, sorry, I should mention, like, back to the case study itself. So the Doubles Diaspora, I just want to say that the genre would be an issue, as Tracy mentioned. So you really have to look at Appendix A. I know it has an awesome name. Appendix A. It has all of our genre rules and our essential requirements. So our genre rules for documentary are quite strict. They're supposed to fund underrepresented documentary, so real traditional documentary. When things slide into factual and lifestyle, it's really not meant for this program. So I would be very, very cautious with a project like Doubles Diaspora that it might not meet the guidelines for genre. However, we do offer a pre-application consultation, which is just a really small step in our dialogue platform where you upload your creatives and you ask for an opinion basically on what do you think of this in terms of your genre? Like, would it meet it? Would it not meet it? And we do work a little bit with the clients to try to get them back onto the path of what's an acceptable documentary for us, but just wanted to be very clear that one would be for sure very problematic, and also the minimum length for us is 22 minutes for a documentary. So again, you really have to read Appendix A and the genre rules and they're called essential requirements that we have before you move forward. And the broadcasters, a lot of them do have knowledge about CMF, but the genre stuff, the onus is really on you as a producer to know what is like CMF eligible and what is not. So I would be really careful with that, especially anything that has food preparation or any of those things. It starts to be a problem. So I wanted to mention that.
Terrific. Thank you, Julie. This is going to be a great segment. All of the segments have been really, really informative, so I congratulate the team on this day. This one is specifically about a short-form scripted series. I'm so happy to moderate this. As the head of the IPF, we fund scripted short-form series. We do it for two reasons. One, we believe in it helps with career advancement for emerging producers. You've heard a lot about today about getting credits on your resume. We believe our program helps. We're hopeful that our program helps you get the credits that are in leadership roles, so creative leadership, production leadership. And the second one, it's your IP, it's your idea. We draw the line at 20 minutes per episode. The reason we do that, very strategically, is just to exclude TV. So we do not get traditional TV applications.
which creates a much more open playing field for really unique new ideas, which is what we're hoping. And we believe in the second goal of IP advancement. So both career advancement and IP advancement. And I think this project is a really, really great example for us to talk through. And I'm going to let these guys introduce themselves. We'll start with Aiden.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Aiden Ababa, and I'm the writer, creator, and producer of Virgins. And I'm really excited to be here today. This is going to be a fun, like a more, hopefully more energetic and fun panel, because I know you've been really using your brain power to do some mathematics up until now. So.
We're not going to talk about tax credits.
Yeah, no tax credits.
Hi, everyone. My name is Fona. For folks that don't know, a great way to remember my name is with a telephone gesture. I was one of the producers on the project.
Hi, everybody. I'm Zach Feldberg, and I'm the head of scripted Gem Originals here at CBC. I had the good fortune to work with this team on Virgins, and I'm just very happy to be here talking about this wonderful series. So, yeah, thanks for coming.
So to start with the context of what is this series, if you haven't seen it, we thought we would start with a trailer so you can actually see the teaser of the video of the series, which gives you a sense of what it's about. So I'm hoping if I just say roll the video, someone will do that.
Are we going out to dinner? I made reservation for you and the guy you just matched with on Tinder. When did I get Tinder? Remember when you gave me your Sephora password? I used that to log into your Facebook and make you a Tinder. You are out of your mind. I'm not going out on a date. Oh my God, and he's kind of cute. Wait, where's Sarah? You know, I was gonna ask the same thing. She's always here before us. Hi, Sarah. That's a lot of energy, girl. You gonna use some of that to manifest a king? Okay, who cares? Everyone has more sex than us. I'm Minna. Right? Right? Yeah.
This says that this is a safe place. If you have any concerns, you can come to me and talk about it. Definitely come to me and talk about it. We don't want to bother HR. Anyways, yeah, great job.
He was just passing by, so he just gave me a ride. But did you give him a ride too? Oh, come on, it's Delina. She's probably sitting crisscross applesauce in the backseat like this. How could I forget? It was so romantic. So.
So now you get a lot more sense of what that's about. I'm going to go to you first, Aiden, and what your inspiration was for the series. What communities were you trying to reach? That's an important part of when we have these ideas.
Yeah. So to introduce a little bit more about the series, so it's a dramatic comedy that follows 4 20-something-year-old East African women in Toronto, awkwardly navigating adulthood as millennials and love and relationships as virgins. And what inspired the show was my life. It was, I went through a breakup, and it was my first heartbreak, and I just wanted, everyone to hate this person as much as I hated them, and so I thought I should write a show and create an audience that would just be Team Aiden. And so that was that was where it really started. And then, as I started developing, I realized, okay, this isn't a single story. This is a story about friendship. So we added some more characters. And then I knew I wanted to have different cultural pieces involved, different cultures represented, because that's what my world looked like as I was growing up. And it just made sense to have it be more reflective of 4 East African young women in their mid-20s. And yeah.
That's fantastic. And you've heard throughout the day, as a creator writer, it's important to find that producing partner. You found a producing partner in Fona. So one, I want to ask how you guys were connected, and also Fona, what attracted you? What made you jump in on this particular project?
Do you want to talk about how we connected first? No, you go. Okay, sure. Add things if you'd like. So we actually met at the NIA Center for the Arts while we were working there together, way back when, 2016, apparently. And we were really great at collaborating together. And I feel like Aiden has been vision, and then I'm okay, but
break it down into pieces because you need to put it on paper somewhere. And so since then, through nonprofit work, she pulled me into the first iteration of Virgins. And since 2018, we've been working together collaboratively on this. But feel free to add more.
I call Fona my work wife. I think once you find somebody who is like the yin to your yang professionally, you just keep them. And when this concept came to me, I didn't have any background in this industry at all. I never imagined ever writing anything, let alone producing. But I knew that with Fona, we could achieve anything. Together, we really can make anything happen. And so that was my pitch to her. And then it worked out.
Aiden, you say you had no experience writing. You couldn't even picture yourself. Fona, had you had producing experience?
No, I had no idea what producing actually meant. I knew that I was good at project management, and you could just take those skills and apply it to film production, because film production, there's so many creatives, but we're the logistics people. Like, I am the HR, I am the accounting. So, yeah, I didn't have those skills, and I didn't know film was an option.
And you don't regret it yet?
No, not yet.
Yeah.
5 years.
I've heard people call themselves recovering producers. There's some period of time where you love it and then you eventually hate it. Before I get to Zach, one more question. So I know where this project started for me because we had funded some development. But before that, you were talking with CBC. How did you bridge this gap from a dream, which we got everyone in this room and no experience, to getting that first step in, talking to Zach or applying to us? What happened between the idea, deciding you guys are going to do this together, and those first real steps where you came to us and came to CBC? And anything else that people said no, whatever that is?
Yeah. The first steps. So I had this concept, and there was an opportunity for an artist residency for independent writing. And I submitted my application. It was the first time I ever did in this genre. And my background is photography, so I am an artist. But I submitted to this artist residency. It was in Latin America, in Colombia, and I got in. And so that's where I started writing the show. When I got back, I further developed the show. But it was... I didn't know what I was doing. So there was a lot of researching things online, looking at scripts online, and kind of working backwards to deconstruct how to write a script, what are the rules. And then from there, I was fortunate enough to get into a couple of programs. One was Regent Park Film Festival's Writing the Web. It was a pilot program at the time. And that program introduced me to so many people who actually work here at CBC. And it helped me develop a log line. I didn't know what a log line was yet at that point. But once that program ended, I felt like I had enough to make a concept trailer. So I reached out to Fona to help me produce this concept trailer. And I didn't know what the word produce meant. I just knew create. We're just going to make it. And then we made this concept trailer in January 2018. And then we released it on Valentine's Day because single girls need something to look forward to. And we used that concept trailer, which was a 13-minute concept trailer that was released in 5 different parts online on YouTube. And we used that to pitch to Zach and Mel at CBC. And the way that we met them, because again, we didn't know how to.
Did you fund that? Like you paid for that yourself to make 13? Yeah. Like how'd you?
That was funded through a lot of prayer.
It's very familiar.
Yeah, we had no money to make it, but we did get a donation from someone in the community who wanted to remain anonymous, and they just asked, "How much do you need?" And I, really naively said, "I think we can do it for $2,000."
Yeah, no,
we couldn't.
So this is, I'm gonna divert just for 1 second. That's the entire genesis of the IPF's development fund, because we were just a production fund prior to 2020, and we'd get hundreds of applications, and part of the requirement was a proof of concept video, and people are just shooting for free, shooting on their iPhone, creating incredible things, somewhere in the $2,000 to $10,000 range. It depends on how much money they really want to put into this. Sometimes they have a little bit of funding, but most times they didn't. And we thought, that doesn't really create a fair playing field. We're going to back right up and we're going to fund development, at which point you don't apply to us with a video, you apply to us with a concept, and we'll give you the money to shoot the video to apply to us for production and other people. So I'll go to you, Zach, now. They've got to you through what's amazing. You heard it. The answer was they were at part of an event, a networking event, and they worked that network, made a contact, brought a different project later, and that is one of the key steps, I think. So, Zach, when you met them and saw this idea, what were the elements you were looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I'll preface it by saying at the beginning of our panel, John, you mentioned some of the ambitions of IPF, and those ring true for us too, for Gem Originals and what we were trying to do, and talking about IP development, talent development, both sides of the camera, just bringing new voices, new talent into the fold. That's a big part of our mission statement, a big part of what we're trying to do. So just to sort of set the stage, that's what motivates us as well. Of course, we're trying to build an audience, a lot of the times a younger audience on Gem. I would say back then that was the motivation, thinking how do we bring the age down a little bit. These days, not to get too deep into Gem Original strategy, we are thinking more in terms of an overall sort of 30 to 49 target, which is true for comedy and drama across the board. So, that's a tangent I will not go on, despite the pull to get into that territory, because that's something we talk about a lot. But in this case, we met at this event. It was interesting hearing you speak, Aidan, about that original piece being like a 13-minute piece, because I don't think I knew that, or maybe I forgot. It's been a little while, but it works so well in the way that it's broken up because it's so character-based. And I think that's what stood out to us, is that you have, and I think they're still on YouTube, right? So you could go back and see them, if you want people to see them. Of course, I just said it, but each character gets their own video, and you get to sort of see this unique personality and perspective of the character. And then there was one that was sort of just an episode, right? Like a 5-minute piece that was, again, this sort of self-produced, low-budget piece, but really showed these characters feel real, like they feel like people, and that's very hard to achieve. It's like that's something that you can look at so many scripts and it's like, this doesn't feel real. This is not a real person that exists in the world. But all of these women felt very real, and together it sort of felt like this is a real group of friends, and it's a group of people you'd want to hang out with, and that you want to get to know. And it's like, what better selling point can you imagine for a pitch? So in a way, before we even had a pitch, we were kind of like, we want to see what we can do together here, because you had proven that sort of point of view and that voice was already so strong. So, and again, that's just very rare. And it's something that we gravitated to. So that's those are some of my initial impressions of those early meetings. And of course, lots happened between then and actual production, but that was the spirit in which we approached it. We just felt like it sort of was exactly what we wanted to be doing.
Real and authentic. It felt like, a group of friends. That makes sense. At the IPF, we are looking for that authenticity, and I wanted to caveat for this group, my role is slightly different than Zach's. Knowing me does not help you. You could pitch me, but it's irrelevant because there's a whole team of evaluators, and the process that it's not me or anyone on the administrative team that chooses the project. It's actually an entire evaluation process. We use up to between 30 and 50 evaluators throughout the year looking at our projects. So you apply to us. Through that evaluation process, you received probably $30,000 in development money. So that's the maximum you can ask for is $30,000. Some people ask for $29,900 and something. It just asked for 30. It's totally fine. Your budget's going to be just fine. And you would have shot a new trailer. You shot your actual proof of concept. You paid yourself for writing. You had writing support. You had mentor brought in.
No, we didn't have a mentor. Yeah. No, but I did bring in a writing support, like a second writer to help out.
Got it. Cool. And so how'd you pull? So I'll go to phone. How did you for the actual production? You're coming in with this with a thin amount of producing experience. You've done your 13 episode yourself. Now you've got a budget and a budget to manage. what kind of support did you bring in for yourself to actually shoot that professional, higher professional proof of concept that you're going to go get production funding with?
For sure. So luckily, between Virgin's work, I was PMing on other people's projects or producing or like being more of a junior producer on other projects. So I've had rates. I also technically stole other people's budgets and reworked them. But using like MOW levels rates where it's like, it starts at 300,000 and like can go up from there. Using those ranges of rates was great to break down the budget as a baseline. And then in terms of...
Remember what your trailer cost you?
Oh, trailer itself was...
Yeah, not production.
I think I don't remember off the top of my head. I'm like,
I
cost
would think
report.
it's like around 15 grand.
15, yeah. So if we give $30,000, roughly around... The lowest we'd see would be, $7,000 towards the trailer. That's untypical. Not typical. 10 to 15 is probably the healthy range. So a third to half of the development funding of 30,000 would go towards producing the proof of concept. I should not say trailer. It is a proof of concept because you don't have to cut a fake trailer. A lot of people do that. They shoot all the scenes that make together like a trailer. A trailer is technically a cut down of your finished movie or first episode. But you can do that, but also if you have sci-fi or something, you may want to just shoot a proof of concept, show that you can pull off some of those special effects or whatever that is, and so it doesn't have to be a teaser type trailer. Zach, and both of you guys, how did you manage, you talked about how the characters felt real to you, and that was the driving factor. Casting, though, you have to now complete the casting of who's going to be in it. Was there tension? Does CBC come in and say, listen, we've got ideas on casting, and you guys are like, no, we know who's going to be in this? Like, how does that happen?
I mean, from my perspective, it started from a place of trust. And I think, Aidan, you had said early, the importance of reaching out to specific East African communities and making sure that was first and foremost the filter through which these characters were cast. And of course, not everyone involved in the original was sort of brought into the series, which you would speak to, much more than I would. But it came from a place of, again, respecting the great work that had already been done there and saying, like, something's working really well here. And we don't want to do anything that would disrupt Aidan and Fona and the team's ability to continue to build on this world that we've already connected to in such a real way. And casting is so integral to that. And I think if anyone that's seen the series, you'll see that. Like, it's clear as day. These actors are portraying these women in a very natural way. And again, it's not something we take for granted. It's something that is hard to do. But I think, and I've heard, Aidan, we've talked about this, but I've also heard you speak to the way you went about going and finding these performers and finding that essence that you were looking for. And I think from our perspective, it was like, how do we support this, but also get out of the way and not try to interfere with this in a way that would jeopardize what you've already proven that you're able to do. So that was our sort of general approach to it. But Aidan and Fona, you'd be able to speak to the details of the process much more than I could.
Zach and everybody that we worked with at CBC were incredibly supportive, like you just said. And so what we did end up doing, for me, authenticity is really important. I've never seen my community on screen before, and the last thing I wanted was to have someone who's totally removed culturally, who just happens to have the same skin color, be playing somebody who is of Ethiopian descent or Sudanese descent, who is Muslim when they're not Muslim. It just doesn't feel right for me as a viewer. So as a creator now, having that opportunity was really crucial. The ways in which we did it, we knew that a lot of actors in our community, the arts is not something that is encouraged culturally. So there aren't a lot of actors who are in the union, who are a part of ACTRA. So it was a very, we said it from the jump, we weren't gonna be union. One, we didn't really have that much money to begin with. But two, also, if we wanted to cast authentically, we knew that we would have to actually go and find these people, and they might actually be greener in terms of talent and experience, and that would be totally okay. And that would be something we would reconcile with in terms of nurturing their talent, creating a healthy set environment so that they can learn, they can take as many takes as we can afford. And yeah.
You could afford all the takes. Did it take more takes than normal? Is that?
I mean, I think the ideal is like 3 takes, you know? And I think that's kind of like the Meryl Streeps of the world. We had more than 3. And that's okay. That's fine. We're actually we're helping to support our community into entering and accessing this industry so that they can, one, become part of the union, get better jobs in the future. So this is just par for the course.
I think that was a good segue into just a second clip we were going to play, which is a piece that talks about that casting and the authenticity. And so why don't we run the second clip, and then you guys can talk about it after.
Thank you for your wonderful hospitality. You have a beautiful home.
So tell me about yourself.
I am a second-year law student, currently studying at City University in London. My mom is from Ghana, and my dad is from Yemen. I'm an only child, so it's nice to be around a big family.
Wow, a lawyer. Your lucky parents must be proud.
Oh, thanks, but I'm not a full lawyer just yet.
Speaking of your parents, where are they?
He came to meet you first personally, Baba, before involving all the family.
Are you Muslim?
Yes.
Born Muslim?
Yes.
You do salat on time?
I struggle with it, but inshallah, I will get better.
Aywa. Tell me why you're here.
First off, I want to thank you for welcoming me into your home. As you know, Sarah and I have been courting for a while now, and I'd like to take the next step with her. I'd like to make it official and ask for her hand in marriage.
It was great to meet you. But we cannot accept your proposal.
Thank you for your wonderful.
So, well, that scene made me angry, but I don't know about you guys. And when you tell us of the importance of that scene and how you guys, as one piece, it's not just the only moment, but as an example of how you guys dealt with the cultural pieces and the cast.
So I love that scene so much. I love the show. But what the scene kind of illustrates is, so we had 3 writers, and in our writers' room, we had 7 people. The reason why we had 7 people when there were only 3 writers is because we wanted to make sure that there were identities represented in the room, whether or not they could write or not, but identities in the room that were reflective of what was going to be on the screen. So that scene was a Sudanese family, Sudanese Muslim family. I myself am Ethiopian, I'm also Christian, and I wrote that scene. But even though there is a lot of cultural similarities and we are adjacent geographically, I knew that it wouldn't be right for me to write that scene completely blind. So one of our cultural consultants is a Sudanese woman, Muslim woman, and we worked together to sort out what would this dialogue actually be like and why would it be this way. And I learned a lot in that process.
Also, our director for that scene was also a Muslim African woman. And so the choices she chose in the framing, having the handshake happen in the foreground, but being kind of blown out and seeing Sarah's face in the background, all these decisions being made about this person. I think the show was made so much more richer and so much more effective in its storytelling because we hired people who were aware of the culture.
Yeah, the word authenticity gets thrown around a lot. We talk about it in our guidelines, and it's that is it in practice, which is a really important part for all of us to consider. Zach, I'm curious, just what's your role or take in that when series like this come and they're spending money and getting the consultancy in, and there's budget line items sometimes that are supporting that authenticity.
Yeah, I think it, not to be repetitive, I think our perspective on that comes from a similar place to the sort of casting piece as well, where it's you want to do whatever you can to support that after having those initial conversations with the creators of the show about where it's going and what the vision is, and making sure that they feel like they have the team they need around them to be able to tell those stories. So I think that was true for this show. It's true kind of across the board, is feeling like these are stories being told from a place of authority, from a place of experience and knowledge, and as content executives on the other side, on the broadcast side, we can support that as best as we can and make sure that the team feels like they have the resources they need, and if they don't, then what can we do to support it? I think in this case, we always felt like we were in very good hands in that sense, where we had very open conversations about what those needs were, at the writing stage through production, and again, on our side, attempted to support however we could, but it always felt like, creatively speaking, there was such a clear line of what you wanted to do here that we never felt like there was any concern. It always felt like very strong from our perspective.
Can I add?
Sure.
We also wanted to mitigate as many risks as possible. So the show, it's kind of, the trailer is very lighthearted and fun, but we discuss some pretty dramatic, heavy subjects. And in order to kind of also protect us as producers and creators, I think it's important that we're not writing from a place of perceived reality of other people's lives and then them coming back afterwards and being upset with us. Because I will say, truth be told, Black Twitter was always at the back of my mind. I do not want Black Twitter to come after me for anything. So this was a very important risk, a creative risk that was being mitigated in these choices as well.
So for Fona, the budget has to match the creative. You got to deliver this thing that has all this high expectation. We see this in our applications where it's such a great idea, and then the next steps are, how can it be pulled off? How can we do this? And so when the rubber hits the road and you get to the actual production and the realities of budget, to share with this team maybe what are the things you hit? Like, what did you learn? What were the hard parts where you don't have the money, but you're spending the money?
For sure. So I wrote a list. I was like, oh yeah, we're going to talk about it. Okay. So one of the pieces that was tougher was that we made a decision to prep while some of the scripts were being finalized. And so we didn't have lock scripts, and we were locking production details while things were being finalized in terms of scripts, so that affected how prep went. Thinking about locations, we had 11 locations, but actually we ended up with 9. I was like, no thank you, please. We're not doing that many unit moves. It's gonna cost too much, everyone's gonna be exhausted, but 9 still ended up happening. We ended up with 16 speaking roles and 60 plus BG. Even though I feel like there were more speaking roles, but we condensed a lot of things. So there was a lot of hand-in-hand creative with finance decisions that were being made through prep and through development that we kept on shifting and adjusting.
So in the conversation where you said no to 9 locations and then you ended up shooting at 9 locations, I'm just curious, that negotiation.
It was 11 to start.
Yes, and also our locations manager was looking for these locations, and we're already in conversations with these locations. So often, most of them have said yes and offered to have like discounted rates, and so we figured it out. And then if not, we condensed the locations. Like scene settings versus locations is different. We had a ton of scene settings in the locations themselves and tried to reuse spaces as much as possible.
Was there a time where you guys were really, like, I'm going to just ask, it's not even on my list of questions, but your relationship gets tested. Your work-wife relationship gets tested. We all do. Like any marriage that's good, you're going to have disagreements, and then you're going to have to overcome them in this conflict resolution. I'm just curious because we have been telling these people, if you want to be the creative type first, you probably want a producing partner. If you want a producing partner, you're going to end up working with creatives you want to work with, and there's a symbiosis there. So I'm curious, what was the down? You have some down parts. How did you manage it? Did you have blow-ups?
Our marriage is perfect. Thank you very much. I don't know where you're trying to start.
Looking for conflict resolution tips. Conflict resolution tips when it's heightened.
I'd say some of our challenges that we ended up figuring out together was cash flow stuff. So of course, every filmmaker says don't put things on your credit cards, and immediately we did that. It's an investment in your career. That's how I love to think about it, an investment into the industry. But we were figuring out things like how to pay for some of the gear that we were renting. So Aiden reached out to someone who was like kind of like a interim financer that helped us get our money at the beginning, just to like get things into prep. And so it was like figuring out that kind of stuff because we didn't know about interim financing until much later.
Couples always fight about money. It's true.
Yeah, exactly.
The good thing about Fauna and I, we never fought about money because whenever there was a problem, we brought our heads together to solve the problem. It was never, this is your fault, or my fault, just to put the physical energy in this direction as well. So yeah, we never really had conflicts in that kind of way. I would say the biggest conflicts was in my capacity as the creative, because I was the producer and also the creative. And so when she's trying to be the producer and say, we need to cut all these locations, and I'm like, well, I'm also a producer too, and I want to keep these locations because they're important to me and my story. I think that was part a challenge, and I learned what not to do for the future.
I'll just jump in and say, like, when you meet this team, for anyone that hasn't in person or is just for the first time now, it's like, it's a very solutions-oriented team. And I think that was impressed upon me and Mel in the first meeting that we had together. And I think it's been true throughout production too, where if there's a problem, you're like, all right, what are the levers we can put? Like, it's very practical. It's like, what can we do to fix this? And I'm sure there were challenges along the way. It was a COVID shoot too, which maybe we don't need to get too deep into that, but obviously that creates a lot of challenge. And every step of the way, you communicated every time there was an issue, but always with like, here are the paths we can take. Here are the solutions that are in front of us. And again, that's something that we recognized immediately. And also just going back to those early pitches, it's like, those are the things that help us feel confident that, like, yeah, let's do this. Let's get into business together, do some development. Let's see where this goes. It's that sort of track record of showing that you've already done that. And this is bigger, sure, but like, why not? You can handle it. And of course you did. So that's something that just comes to mind hearing you talk about your dynamic through production.
Solution-oriented, problem solving. I think that's very smart. It is bigger than as the previous development piece, but it's still smaller. It's a tight budget. What was your total budget? Do you remember with production?
700.
700, yeah. So you would have had us plus Belfund plus Ontario Crates or something to get there, plus tech credits. Oh, and CBC's license.
Under 7, but we didn't have Ontario Crates. It was Belfund, IPF, and CBC.
CBC license, yeah, tax credits, etc. Yeah, cool. And the so that's for producers that's a pretty good budget. That's we've seen them, if they get under 400 for a short form series, that ends up yielding 60 to 90 minutes worth of content across 15 times 6 episodes or whatever that might be. Under 400 is feeling really small. We see it, but it's difficult. But sometimes out in different regions, you can do that. 500, 600, 700 seems to be the number for a short form series. So if you have that in your head, we fund $200,000 for production. You're going to need one other plus some tax credits plus a license to get there. So in that budget, that's amazing. It's a $700,000 budget for emerging producers. You have those challenges. Sometimes we feel like that's a great. I talk about how that's a great learning space. It's kind of reduced minutes, reduced budget, and it's a great place to learn and hustle. However, I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell me I'm totally wrong, and that is, it's a difficult place to work in. I'm curious. Yeah.
I mean, we were building the plane as we were flying it, so it was always going to be difficult. There was always going to be challenges. One of the things that I learned once we were in post-production is typically for a short form series, it's $100K an episode. So when we were looking at the other CBC Gem originals that were released in the same year as us, most of them were 6 to 8 episodes. We did 10 episodes. So when I was reaching out to the showrunners asking, like, is it tight for you? They're like, no, it's actually pretty fine. I didn't understand. I couldn't understand what we were doing wrong. And then I realized, we were super ambitious, overzealous, and people who had 100K per episode, we had 60K or just under 70K an episode, and no wonder we were so tight. I don't remember your question, but I want to share
answered
that.
it. That was it. Sort of, yeah. Well, so let me ask you this on the strain of short form, because we're talking about building blocks for a career, and there was a progression, and you made the short form. Do you feel that short form was a valuable step for you? So the IPF we're invested in this. We did it since 2010, and we believe in it. CBC Gem is a fantastic partner, and a lot of our series end up on CBC Gem. And so obviously Zach is also aligned that this is a great building block. Do you feel that was a great building block for your career? Do you think you started before your series here, and after your series you got different CVs?
Yeah, I was looking at our first comms with Zach and Mel in our emails, and the pitch deck that we had sent was for a 30-minute series. It was a 22 to 30-minute series. And it was after pitching to them that we had considered doing a short form version. Originally, I did not want to do short form because my vision was television. I only watched television, so that's what I wanted to do. But the value in doing short form was that I would have more creative license. I would be able to continue owning my project. I wouldn't have to option it and sell it to a larger production company and have them do what they will with it. And owning my art was very important to me, especially because I already was an independent artist prior to this. So my framework was always in that capacity. For that reason, short form was incredibly valuable. I got control. I got to get paid to learn how to create my own work of art. And now I have a new career, a new industry. So I'm very grateful for short form.
Yeah, please.
And I would add, so it's when doing short form, it's the same length and amount of work as a feature film. And so when there was a job that I was interviewing for, and I've said I've done web series, and they were like, great, you've essentially made a feature. All we do is features. So it was like a direct link to the next step that feels like features can scale up from there. And this would be essentially like a micro budget feature if we looked at it like telefilm talent to watch level.
Yeah, we've heard the reverse in some ways, where people have the concept and they're thinking of it as a feature film. They kind of wanted to get into TV, but they needed a place to start. And short film they did. They're trying to figure out that next step. And that's the same minutes as a feature film, but you can do a series. And so then you get the whole series episode, you're writing a Bible, you're doing all those parts as part of it. So if you have an instinct to go TV, you don't have to go feature film as your second micro-budget feature film. You can go short form series. Zach, I'll give you a sec to talk about the value of short form to CBC Gem.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in short form in some capacity for, I guess it's, 10 plus years now, which is pretty amazing when I think about it. But like most of those years at CBC, but I think I love the idea of short format because, in this country, especially because there are so many great funds available, of course, like IPF and Bell Fund and so on, but that's supported as well. But it's an opportunity because there are those other potential partners, including CBC Gem. And it's a challenge, and it forces you creatively to think about what can I do within these boundaries, and they are finite, and they can be really tight. Like we've just been talking about, and sort of hearing from the team. It's not sort of a TV scale production. It's a fraction of that. So it sort of forces you to say, like, what is the essence of this story and of these characters, and what can we do within this sandbox, and can we do it within this or not? And if you can't, then it's okay. It's just sort of like, let's park that, and that's my half-hour pitch, or that's my feature, or 1 hour, whatever it is. But if you can find a way to make it work, I think, it's a really impactful way to get an idea out there, or a character out there, or just a point of view, or a voice that is sort of burning inside you that you want to sort of get out onto screen. And again, I think we're very fortunate to have all of these opportunities to make these types of programs in Canada. And I'm grateful to, have a role here at CBC and with GEM to provide a national platform where people can really see these shows en masse. And, I think it's a unique sort of corner of the industry and of sort of TV film, in that sort of realm. But I think it's one that can be very powerful and just a great way to get stories out there. I think it's a challenge as well in that, especially on a platform like GEM, which mostly has half hours, 1 hours, feature films from around the world, and Canada, mostly Canada, of course. But, when you see a series that is a shorter format, it's a little bit unexpected. It's sort of like, there's an element of what is this for the average viewer, let's say, of like, why is this episode, you see the timestamp when you click or tap on the thumbnail, and it's, 11 minutes or it's 17 minutes. And they're sort of like, I don't understand what this is. Is it a half hour? Is it a comedy? Whereas if you see a 22-minute timestamp, you're like, I know what this is. This is a half hour and it's a sitcom or whatever. So I think you need to overcome that. And I think the shows that really distill their essence into an episode, certainly on a series, into like the early parts of a first episode, where you immediately get like, oh, okay, I want to spend some time with these characters. I don't know what this format is, but I'm hooked. I'm interested. I want to see more. I think the shows that do that really well, we find, people will watch all the way through, and those shows perform very well. And I would count Virgins among those shows. When you get into that first episode, meet the team, understand immediately what their motivations are. They're manifesting their lives, and you just sort of want to see that journey for each of them. It's set up very clearly, and then you're in for, the ride of the 10 episodes. And again, it's an unusual format in a world where there are, more typical formats surrounding it, but that's, I think, part of why it works. And it's a fun challenge, I think. It's a fun needle to thread. So yeah.
It's rewarding in the end.
Yeah.
So we're going to take time to open it up to questions. That's an important part of this process. So if anyone has a question, I think you can raise your hand and we can get a mic over your way. There's a question here. Lisa, who's walking with the mic? Is it Lisa? Yep. Thank you.
What was the application process like for getting this all started?
I can answer the IPF application part. Yeah. Well, you could give your perspective, but our development phase is basically 3 pages of written material. So concept, you're not giving us scripts, you're not giving us your Bible and everything, but it is all the little pieces that are in your script. So example storylines, kind of what the season might look like, but just the general concept. It's 3 pages maximum. It is important. The maximum part is important because this year we had over 200 applications apply for 30 development spots. So we are, like many of the funds, we're oversubscribed. but it's the evaluators read a lot, and it does tell us if you can edit, if you can. So some people will go like margin to margin with words, like technically it's 3 pages, but they just made tiny font and whatever. That's not a good look, because it kind of shows you're not knowing how to articulate your idea. The reverse is also true. If you keep repeating the same statements and it's really like repetitive, then that's not quite the same. That's like, oh, they're having a hard time just filling 3 pages. So there's that. You also have a little development budget. That is not production. It's just how are you going to spend the money if you get $30,000 from us, and it's your team. We do have, so your team is just your CV, any past experience. For us, a short film is all you need. You can't be brand new, but even as little as a short film as a writer or producer would work for us as a qualifier. We don't require, there's no broadcast partner. You don't need a platform, letter of intent or anything. It's just you and your concept. Probably the one key piece is that we do require you to apply now with a story editor or a development executive who's mentor. The kind of piece, you maybe don't call them a mentor because they should be in your budget. So someone who's a bit more senior as a writer to help you. And they're just signed up for, $1,000, $2,000 of the money we're going to give you as a support, as a story editor to help you craft that. And they should have a little bit more experience than you. So it's not much.
Can I also add, one of the things that I always think about because I used to do grant reviewing in the past in nonprofit, and I think about the fact that juries are usually made up of people that would be applying, so artists and creatives, so making things visual and interesting and not just white paper and text. And then also looking at their evaluation rubric, kind of like how in school when they give you how we're going to score you, looking at that and comparing your application to their rubric to see if you would hit those points is what I think about.
Those are good points. I saw a question. Was it in the back there? Yeah, there was 2 out there. Yeah, the far list. This is the fun part. We get to make Lisa run around. This is the best part. So if the next question
the
could be
steps,
over
right?
in
You
this
got to
corner.
get those steps. I was very curious to know, when you created the YouTube version of this, was that before you spoke to CBC? And if it was, how did that impact your decision, CBC? Did it impact at all? Like, did you look at the numbers? Did it matter how it did online? And would you recommend like emerging producers to do something like that?
Yes, we did have it made already.
The numbers had no impact, and it really was for us an indication that again, I sort of spoke to the characters. The characters jumped out at us. They were so memorable. Those sketches were just so like intentional and lived in and natural, and they felt real. And that again, because they had that rare quality, we were drawn to it in a way that made us excited about the potential of developing it further. But again, the numbers, I don't know what they are or were, and it never even crossed our mind. And I would say, it's a tough one because John spoke to this earlier. It's costs a lot of money to go out and make something like that, and there's obviously a scale. It goes way up from the sort of 2000. I mean, you can spend a lot of money making a proof of concept that doesn't ultimately bear fruit. And I think I would never say, it's a good idea to shoot a proof of concept before pitching to CBC Gem, because for that very reason. And yet, occasionally, we've seen some really strong ones, Virgin's included, where it's like, wow, that's a really strong sell. I think 99% of the time we don't have the luxury of a piece like that. So again, it's not a requirement by any stretch, but we've seen some great ones, and sometimes it's undeniable. I think sometimes the voice is so strong, and you can just really get it from something like that maybe wouldn't be as evident on the page. Not to say that if it was just on the page, we wouldn't have felt compelled to move into development together, but sometimes, I think it just puts it over the edge, and it's like, yeah, we see it, we get it. We can move on from here. So
the reverse can be true.
100%.
Got to be to give some advice on that. So one, we do look at what's called previous phases of development. We would have looked at this project and said they're not beyond. Like, we won't fund something because some people want our production funding, so they'll just try to come into development and go, oh, I need development money, but they're done. Their scripts are written. Their Bible's written. They're trying to not tell us that, but they have to in good conscience tell us what phase of development. And if you have video out on the internet, you clearly shot something, written something, and published it. So you could put yourself in to be ineligible for our development fund. You can go get production fund from Bell Fund or others. And in the case, let's say, so in this case, the numbers probably did matter, but also probably weren't very big because we wouldn't have considered it a completed publication. It would have felt like an experiment of some kind. And it is true that if you can shoot video and everyone reads your materials and go, this is great. And then they look in the video and it's like, that's not what I was picturing. And then it actually has a negative effect. So it can push you over the top. It can also be a negative. So for us, I wouldn't recommend shooting, get our development money, and write your scripts and get support writing your scripts and then shoot your proof of concept when you're in that same phase. But the testing is good. Go ahead.
Our numbers were big to us.
I would also add that the back end of YouTube is great for analytics and statistics and figuring out who your audience is to be able to put into those applications and think about who that target audience is, because that's something that folks always want to know.
It's true. Yeah, there was a question here, I think, with
Thank you both, as well as CBC, for sharing kind of your experience making this. I was curious if you folks had found a platform for a second window following the kind of lapse of CBC GEM's license, and if not, if that was something you were looking into. I was just kind of curious about the kind of lifetime of this series after GEM.
Who said our license lapsed? We're really excited about the future. The grand vision of where we're going is expanding the show to be a half-hour series. I think you could tell by everything Fona was saying, like we had 16 speaking characters and 69, something like that, background actors. Like this is a big universe, and I don't know how we did it in 10 minutes. What we did in some of our episodes are 15 minutes. So that is the trajectory that we're on and that we're working towards. And hopefully there'll be something to announce soon.
Other questions in the room? Was there any questions online, Lisa, do we know? Not yet. I'll ask, what time are we wrapping? I didn't actually, so we got a couple more minutes if we need. I thought I would ask a question about, you were talking about analytics. Marketing discoverability, you guys are going to hear that that's an important part of, getting success. In our development phase, part of an eligible expense, of course, is to do audience research. You shoot your proof of concept, but actually you need to have it done prior to applying us for production, because you need to put it online or do a test group and come back with audience data. So you would have audience assumptions, and you're going to validate those or tweak those based on the results. And so I'm curious, first of all, two parts. One, from the pre-production, before you got production funding, how well defined was your audience? How important was that in going to get production funding? And secondly, when you got your show made and happening, what was your role in marketing and discoverability, and what was CBC's role in making sure the show gets seen or finding that audience?
Well, I would say our community, our audience was pretty well defined, and we had the advantage of already releasing on YouTube in 2018 our concept trailers. And our views on our videos were around like 5,000 views. I think the highest was maybe a touch above that, which was a really big deal because we had no money to make this, and none of us were marketing experts, but we were able to find an audience online organically in that way, and they were waiting for more. That because we released it like it was a big deal. Like, okay, every week on this day, the next video is going to drop. And there was only 5 videos, so everybody was waiting for the next one. So we did have that advantage. And then your second question about the audience development plan?
Yeah, after you were produced and the show's going to air, what role does the this room might want to know, what role is my role? Do I just pass the show off to CBC and they take care of the marketing, or you're connected with your audience? And I'm also curious from Zach, what are the two roles you guys play?
So I learned that that we had the opportunity to market our own show. And so one of the funds that you can apply for is Bell Fund's Audience Development Plan. It's around, I think it's like $47,500. And in that you decide...
Specific number.
Yeah.
It's not 50.
Exactly. And so in that, we dedicated a lot of the funds to ad spend on social media, teaching people how to find the show, because we knew the audience was already there and waiting, but most of our audience didn't know about CBC Gem, and so we showed them what it was and how to log on. We created videos on how to do so. And then we also used it to apply for the awards circuit, so the CSAs, and then also to go to different festivals as well, which was also a learning curve I was sharing with you earlier, because we didn't necessarily, that wasn't strongly on our radar to start with. But we focused...
Well, you're so busy. It's a gauntlet to go from the idea to develop it, to shoot it. You're working with CBC, you're in production, and you finally deliver it, and it feels like I'm done. Yeah. But you're not done. You're into audience development, reaching that audience, helping them find it. Yeah.
And we created like 2 parties. We had a launch party and then we had a Valentine's Day party as well, because we knew that our audience wanted to engage in real life. And so that was an interesting, creative explanation in our funding.
So Zach, what do you tell producers that are going to come on to CBC Gem, which is again such a wonderful partner? I'm just curious. What role the producer plays, or what role you guys play in helping it get seen?
Yeah, I mean, we have amazing internal teams here at CBC that handle, obviously there's publicity, but there's also, on the digital side, we have the CBC Gem TikTok account and CBC Gem Instagram, and social teams that handle those sort of voices. And they're amazing sort of filters that can get the word out about different original series. So they were heavily involved, both of them, in helping to get the word out about Virgins. And, they'll do so in a way that makes sense for both the show and for the voice of that channel. So that's sort of one big way that we can reach this audience, and that we did in this case. And they do great work, and you can sort of see that work on again, both Instagram and TikTok. And then, our publicity team will get involved in terms of just like pitching to outlets, especially CBC outlets, internal CBC media outlets, but also just anyone that they might have a relationship that they think would be compatible with the show or interested in doing some coverage and working with the production on getting the word out. So those are, in short, 2 of the big ways that we might get more involved. There are others, but those are, typically the starting point for what are the sort of things we can do. I mean, I will say, without getting too deep into the numbers, and I think we're short on time, but Virgins did very well on Gem, and I think part of that is, the Gem itself is a marketing tool, and surfacing the show on the front of Gem is a great way for people to discover it. And the key art is beautiful, and the name is really striking. It's a very, like, you sort of notice it, and it's like Virgins with an exclamation mark. And, the cast is great, and you see them against this bright red background. And I think that helps. I think that helps it stand out on a very busy platform and a busy streaming ecosystem. And people can say, I don't know what this is, but I want to know what it is. And people will get involved and, again, get into that first episode and meet the team and say, yeah, I want to go along for the ride with these characters. So I think, in a way, that's discoverability too. That's audience development too, is just get them in. And then once they're in, they'll be along for the ride.
It's a really good point. I think we have one more question, and then that'll probably be it. That's the wrap. Okay.
I was curious. Hello. Is it on? I was just wanting to know about the characters, how and casting. How much involvement did you have, Aiden, in the casting, especially fighting for actors that you might have wanted to make it from the original to the TV production?
If you could restate the question in case someone's online.
Yes. So the question was, how much involvement did I have in casting and fighting for my choices in the actors. I mean, I love that you use your choice of words, fighting, because that kind of speaks to one of the things I wanted to share too. I thought that coming into this type of relationship, everything would be a fight, so I was ready to fight. Look how nice Zach is. There was there was no fight necessary. Everything was a conversation, and also John too. And so with cast, there wasn't no fight at all. I was involved at every step of that's a major creative decision, and that lied with me. But of course, we have partners involved, like the broadcaster, so they also get to be involved in that process. And they would give me their recommendations, and luckily it was aligned. So yeah, it's a great partnership all the way around.
I would also add that the actual fight was trying to find the right people. That, like, we cast one of our
audition.
Yeah,
it was finding people to audition was the fight.
Yeah, and then casting, we locked in one of our main leads, like just in the nick of time, not too late, but like we were sweating. Well, I was sweating. I don't know about Aiden.
She's lying. We locked in one of our main from the 4, like a couple days before going to picture, which is crazy.
It's a bad idea. It's not recommended.
Yeah, but that also goes to speak to, it was hard finding actors to audition because not everybody had the confidence of the experience of acting, and that this would be like a safe enough, encouraging set for them to try, and they succeeded. So.
Well, and you go back to that point, you problem solved, you just kept going. There's a certain tenacity, I think, that is required, and I'm assuming that would take some trust in each other, that you're over the edge of this, approaching the edge of this precipice, and you're like, it's going to be okay, we're going to pull this out, and you did. I'm sure that's not the only thing that came at the 11th hour. I've done production. There's always something that comes, how are we going to solve this problem immediately after a full day already, and that's going to happen. So I think that's where we'll have to stop. I want to thank you guys. It was such a really, it was wonderful for me to get to relive some of the stuff that we did a year ago. And I think I can't wait to see what happens with you guys next in your careers, to go from where you were and through this gauntlet, like I said, and what happens next in your careers is going to be really exciting. So thank you. And thank you guys for your questions.
John.
I think the takeaways from the day is read. You know, we heard about reading the guidelines. Read resources. We'll send out some links afterwards. There's the independent producers website for CBC. There's a business and rights website. We've gathered all sorts of resources together. Telefilm has gathered resources, as has CMPA. So read. Connect with people. We heard from Zach about in the panel about how they met. Connect with people at your table. Connect through One Stop Business Workshop has a Facebook group. Please join us there and start a conversation. We really want to continue this on. And then finally, I think the big thing, which is hard, just start somewhere, start doing something. You've heard about all the different bits and pieces. No one has everything. So just start and you'll learn along the way. We want to hear your stories. So I think that's it. So thank you.